form of the puppet. In Fnaf 6, we literally see this thing called a security puppet. Sadly, Henry's daughter Charlie is killed outside of the confines of the restaurant. The puppet finds her too late and lies down beside her in the rain, and the two become one. And in Fnaf 6, the last official time that we see this character, it comes complete with tears in its eyes. In fact, in every iteration of the character, the puppet mask has tears. Or should I say almost every iteration. Look at the security puppet minigame from before Charlie's death. The mask has no tears. It's only after Charlie dies and the thing is possessed that tears suddenly form on the mask. Tears mean that Charlie's soul is inside of this thing. But now, there are no tears left on the mask because Charlie's soul has been released. She's no longer inside security puppet. When Henry burned everything at the end of FNAF 6, it worked. Kinda. It freed all the souls that were trapped inside of the metal. This coincides with what we see on the blueprints for Remnant. Overheating might neutralize the effects permanently. However, it didn't work all the way. There's one thing that Henry's fire didn't account for, something that it didn't purge: agony. You see, Remnant soul metal might be the focus of the games, but it isn't the only powerful force that drives this franchise forward. The other is actually found within the pages of the Fazbear Frights books: agony. Now, it's important to distinguish the difference between agony and Remnant. I've seen a lot of places using the terms interchangeably, but in Fazbear Frights, they're explained to be distinctly different. Remnant is all about the soul. When an animatronic becomes possessed, that spirit literally becomes attached to the metal. That metal can then be melted down into a substance that Fazbear Frights describes as a boiling liquid mercury, aka Remnant. If you inject that metal into other animatronics, it suddenly brings them to life using the power of the original souls. Compare that to agony. In the books, agony is studied by Dr. Phineas Taggart. He states that agony, quote, has a greater energetic radius and power than any other emotion. I've done numerous experiments to measure, capture, contain, and study the leftover emotion embedded into objects that were near a tragedy. The book even goes so far to explain that the items Phineas has collected weren't possessed by ghosts or spirits, but instead were energized by agony. So when someone feels agony, it doesn't just stay with them, it can infect inanimate objects around them and linger there. In other words, while those original animatronics no longer have spirits powering them, the agony they felt while being murdered remains attached to the suits. That's why the Blob's interested in collecting the suits. It's not collecting spirits, it's collecting agony. By combining them, it becomes more powerful. All the pain and suffering of the children from over the years brought together to create one giant monster. That's why the eyes are glowing red for all the animatronics and endoskeletons. It's also why the puppet and baby aren't glowing. The puppet has been put to rest by her father. She's no longer tormented.
My daughter, if you can hear me, it's time to rest. For you and for those you have carried in your arms.
And baby, well, yeah, she is certainly angry. She is jealous, but she's also eager to please her father even after death.
Now we can do what we were created to do and be complete. I will make you proud, Daddy.
She embraces the monster that she's become. She's not filled with agony, but everyone else? Absolutely. Even in that finale speech, we hear Henry say it.
This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should.
Agony! Woo, woo, he did it! He said
Agony!
it! So there you have it, friends. Over half a year after the game's release, we finally solved the last mystery of Security Breach. The Blob isn't a giant continuity breaker, it's just a very cleverly composed amalgamation of animatronic parts slithering through the walls looking to accumulate agony, the tortured emotions coming from all the old animatronics on display throughout the Pizzaplex. And now that we've solved it, not convinced that we've seen the last of it. Despite the fact that the Afton ending's only worth 2 stars, when the highest is 3, the DLC poster does seem to indicate that the story is going to follow this particular ending. Notice the melted parts of Chica's face, the ruined Pizzaplex, which directly follows the building collapse and Afton's ending. But look a little closer. There are mysterious red eyes up in the top left, as well as some suspicious looking cables down in the bottom right. Even if the Blob did finally kill Afton during the ending, the agony would still remain. It perseveres beyond death, and it isn't able to simply let go. In short, the Blob is still very much a threat, something that is more powerful than anything we've ever faced in the franchise. In fact, maybe my previous prediction about the Afton amalgamation could still come to pass. As I called out in a previous theory, in the books, Afton gets mixed up with a bunch of agony, which creates a giant monster trash rabbit. And isn't that exactly what we're seeing in the ending of Security Breach? Afton mixed in with a bunch of agony parts. I suspect that Afton may be able to take control of this thing, overriding the Blob's directionless rage and focusing it in order to wreak havoc on Gregory and whoever this new character might be, just like he does during the Stitch Wraith stories from Fazbear Frights. The only issue is, I'm not sure how we'd be able to stop it. In Fazbear Frights, the solution is to see into people's memories and trap them inside those memories. It's a pretty random power, so it's hard to say how that might work in the games. Unless, of course, this new character is meant to be someone that could remind Afton or the Blob of good memories, bringing them back to reality and quelling the agony within. But that, my friends, is a theory for another day. So in the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Oh, it's over! It is finally over! The thing that's been haunting me for over 2 years is finally dead and buried. The Fazbear Frights book series. 12 books, 36 stories, 2,912 pages. Yeah, you bet I counted each and every page of that thing. No more do I have to waste my nights reading page after page after page of tepid, warmed-over horror for the tiniest scrap of lore. No more will I be forced to try and convince you that the books are important tools for solving the games, actually, guys. And no more will I have to write the words Fazgoo WTF into my notes. I get to go back to being a gaming channel again. Unless, of course, I want to read these 7 Hello Neighbor books. Yeah, right. I guess all I have to do now is wait for Security Breach DLC to roll out and, No. No! Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's basically book theory in disguise, because there's now another Fnaf book series in existence. Oh, it physically hurts me to say that, but Tales from the Pizzaplex is a thing that apparently exists. The first book came out a month ago, and there are now 3 more due before the end of the year. How? How is it possible to write so many books? Scott, my dude, I appreciate the hustle, but maybe just spend a little less time on your literature empire and a little more time making a game with a cohesive narrative. Who am I kidding? He just used the time to release more Funko Pops. You know, all those essential characters to the franchise, like Radioactive Glow Foxy. I just can't. Regardless of my feelings about the books, one thing I will say is that they've led to some of our most important theories to date. So, despite my better judgment, I read the new one so you guys at home don't have to. And I gotta say, I was surprised. This thing is a roller coaster ride. In this singular book, you have one emotional gut punch of a story that's probably the best in the entire FNAF series, one incredibly gruesome story where people are physically being ripped apart by Glamrock Bonnie, and one where the entire world dies of cancer because a girl wanted to play FNAF AR. That last one, by the way, is barely an exaggeration of the actual story. A girl goes to the Pizzaplex and hops into an augmented reality machine which causes everyone else in the entire world to develop cancer and also give birth to translucent goo babies that eventually swallow the girl whole. This is a product that really exists in the FNAF canon. It's likely that what's really happening in this story is that she's trapped in the AR machine and all of this is happening inside the prison of her own mind. But let me just say that the story leaves it very vague. Anyway, I just saved you 80 pages of reading stories about kids dying of cancer. You're welcome. So in the aftermath of all of this, I've rummaged back through the old box of theories to come up with 3 mini theories for you to chew on. 2 that clarify major points from Security Breach, and 1 that gives us an idea of where the game's DLC is gonna take us next. To get there, we're gonna be covering lore. So much lore. Game lore, book lore, real lore, Ballora. More lore than your brain has room for. So get ready there, Laura Croft. Today, we've got ourselves 3 theories at Freddy's. Let's motivate this episode with a controlled shock. Theory number 1, Security Breach's animatronics aren't possessed, except for Freddy. Maybe some people already thought of this, maybe have never really questioned it, but if I'm right, this would be a huge deal because it would be the first time in the series that the main animatronics don't have spirits inside of them. This was something that really stuck with me after our last episode on the Blob, and I figured we should probably discuss it here, so let me take you through my thinking. First, consider this. Who would be possessing these animatronics at this point in the series? Security Breach takes place after the FNAF 6 fire, a fire that, as we spoke about last time, worked as Henry intended. As a quick reminder, Henry set the fire to purge all the remaining spirits out of Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby. And he was successful in his project. They're gone now. That's why the puppet mask inside the blob has no more tears, and why Baby's eyes are all extinguished. What Henry didn't account for, though, was agony. The way I see it, the blob is a collection of agony that lingers on inside the older models of suits and endoskeletons. The rage that remains even after the spirits pass on. So if I'm truly right about that, all those past victims have been laid to rest. They're gone. They're removed from the franchise, off the lore table. So if not them, then what spirits would be inside the rock stars? Well, the only other option are the 9 missing kids that we see in the newspaper article during the game's bad ending, and honestly, that's just too many. We only get 6 new animatronics in this game: Freddy, Monty, Chica, Roxy, daycare attendant, and Music Man! It's been too long. I specifically did this episode just so I had an excuse to do that. I suppose you could say that there were 7 if you count the 2 sides of the daycare attendant, but still, that is 2 spirits short. But you don't have to take my word for it. The game outright tells us this itself. About a month ago, Reddit user Seriously Unserious posted a big research doc breaking down the opening cutscene of the game from the perspective of a computer expert. This was research that they were doing for a video on the Rye Toast channel, which, shout out to a fellow Fnaf theorist, love your cat by the way. If you've never heard of Rye Toast, go check him out. I mean, when you got thumbnails like this, you know that this is a channel coming from a great creator with some really smart stuff to say. Anyway, in his Reddit post, Seriously Unserious looks at the glitch trap virus for exactly what it is: a computer virus, going into the specific details of how viruses work and seeing how it affects Glamrock Freddy. You see, computer viruses don't live independently within a system. They have to be attached to something, usually a file or a program, and when said program runs, that triggers the virus and allows it to run. And believe it or not, but we actually watch this process happen at the very beginning of Security Breach. Notice how when we're looking through Glamrock Freddy's HUD, we get a glimpse that he's in show mode. There's an integrity bar and we get a line that says test run. Also, you'll notice the command line interface here where the primary folder is named System32, which has always been associated with the 32-bit version of Windows. In other words, Freddy and the other animatronics are PC master race, baby! But as we all know, very shortly into Freddy's performance, he stops dancing and begins to glitch out when he gets triggered by a child that's out in the audience. That's what we've covered in the past. But one thing that we've never done is look through these 5 seconds at a quarter speed to actually watch the cascade of events playing out that ultimately result in Freddy's crash. Inside the System32 folder, Freddy runs a program named Git568. We also see this happen in the code when the command line Heat869 pops up: heat vision or thermal vision. So it would seem like the Git program is telling Freddy to scan the audience and look for a kid to potentially grab. Eventually, there's a second command line which loads in some other programs and runs tests. All of these tests come back with a negative result, except for the last one, which receives a Y. Yes, and that's when the program starts to crash. At the same time, Freddy supposedly finds Gregory in the crowd. This then prompts Freddy's program to define rule X. Looks like the code is searching for what it's supposed to do in a situation like this. We don't know what that rule is, but we do know that the next step is to return warning 79, which is when we see the word warning pop up in the HUD. Freddy then goes into overdrive and the whole thing aborts. It tries to init task, initialize a new task, but this is met with a void response, meaning that it's not getting a response from Freddy's RAM. The next line then tells us alloc overload, which shows the virus trying to reallocate resources in Freddy's memory, but there's an insufficient amount, which causes SW.failure and Freddy crashing to the ground. After that, he's booted up into safe mode, which is a way to boot up a system that uses only the bare essential programs. Get it? Bare? Because he's a bear. You'll notice that Glitch Trap isn't a problem for Freddy throughout the rest of the game, which tells us that the Glitch Trap virus is actually housed as a part of show mode. It's a non-essential program. This is why Freddy's in the clear for the remainder of the game, but the other animatronics are suddenly in Kill Gregory mode, because once the show's done, Glitch Trap activates. It's funny, but in a poetic twist, the Glitch Trap virus caused Freddy to glitch, crashed him out of show mode, which in turn rendered Glitch Trap unable to corrupt his system. It's only after the corrupted parts of the other animatronics are added to Freddy that we finally see Glitch Trap able to get a stronger hold over his system. But let's go back to that allocation overload that prompted Freddy's crash in the first place. Normally, this is caused by a lack of CPU or RAM, but why would it crash inside of Freddy and not any of the other animatronics? What else could be taking up the valuable disk space inside of Freddy? Well, how about the soul of Michael Afton? Why else would Freddy suddenly not have enough resources when all the other animatronics work fine? It's because he has something inside of him that they don't. The spirit of someone else. A spirit that starts to show activity once he sees Gregory Gregory out in the audience. And while we're on the subject of dead kids, theory number 2, Gregory, everyone's favorite robot kid, was built using old parts of staff bots. I know the whole Gregory is a robot theory is already a bit controversial, but like it or not, robot kids have been an accepted thing inside this universe since Charlie had 4 versions of herself hidden behind closet doors in the initial novel trilogy. And where there's a robot kid, there also tends to be a box that they can pop out of. Again, case in point, Charlie. And wouldn't you know it, but the new Tales from the Pizzaplex book doubles down on both robot kids and boxes, with not just one story, but 2. In the second story, Lally's Game, Selena's about to marry the love of her life, Cade. They move into a new house, and while unpacking, Selena sees an old trunk that belongs to Cade, a box that Cade insists is full of memorabilia. Surprise, surprise, it's not memorabilia at all, but rather yet another robot kid, Lally. Yeah, Lally is the robot child that's on the cover of this book, but that visual is actually misleading. Lally does have the childish facial features and is around 3 to 4 feet tall, but he isn't purple. Rather, he's meant to be white with black joints. Anyway, once again, we find ourselves with a robot child that's locked away inside of a box, one that is specifically mentioned to be related to the Pizzaplex. But it's another story, Frailty, where things get real interesting. In this one, we're given yet another robot girl, Jessica. But Jessica's built a little bit differently. Around her neck, she wears a heart-shaped pendant that has healing properties. When she shaves off parts of that pendant, she's able to heal sick people around her. As the pendant gets smaller and smaller, rusty, oily metal junk begins to mysteriously appear around her until, once the pendant's gone, Jessica just becomes a pile of scrap. If that story sounds vaguely familiar to you, it should, because the exact same thing happened in the second ever Fazbear Fright story, To Be Beautiful. In that one, a girl named Sarah finds Eleanor, Fazbear Frights' version of Baby, in a junkyard. As thanks for rescuing her, Eleanor grants Sarah a wish. Sarah wishes, as the title of the story suggests, to be beautiful. Each morning, Sarah wakes up to have yet another part of her fixed. The only stipulation is that Sarah keep wearing a mysterious pendant. In the end, Sarah takes off the pendant and collapses into a pile of rusted old garbage. She had been rebuilt piece by Eleanor, looking and acting like a human, but held together by a pendant made of remnant. Until the pendant came off, the illusion was broken, and she turned back into trash. Jessica, in this new book, appears to be yet another victim of Baby's scheme. However, there's more to Frailty than just human-looking metal, because I don't think Jessica is just made out of any old junk. I think she's made out of very special junk. At the very start of the story, we get this line, quote, Jessica pushed the wet mop across the hospital floor, to and fro, to and fro. She remembered that saying from somewhere before, she just didn't remember from where, something from the past. Now alone, this wouldn't amount to all that much, but this forgotten memory of pushing a mop to and fro is repeated 3 other times throughout the story. It's one of those weird details that goes completely unexplained, has no actual bearing on the plot, but feels important because it's repeated so many times and is so oddly specific. We do eventually learn that Jessica's aware of her current state as a heap of junk held together by a magic pendant, and that it's all tied to a decision that she made sometime in her past when she was a normal kid with a normal life, but this specific memory about a mop? Nothing. She has memories of her past, sure, but the compulsion to mop? Yeah, she has no idea where it's coming from, which is why I suspect it's not her memory. Instead, I think it's coming from the memory of these guys, the staff bots in Security Breach. We have a number of mopping staff bots throughout the facility, all programmed to move their mops to and fro, just like Jessica. Now, we know that Jessica's made out of junk. I'm not suggesting that she's just a staff bot in disguise or something, but we also know that there's a lot of broken and discarded staff bots underneath the Pizzaplex, and the Pizzaplex is mentioned in the story Frailty. So what if Eleanor uses parts of these broken down staff bots as part of the junk to recreate Jessica, and the memory inside its metal has mixed with Jessica's own memories? Well, it would explain why she remembers the phrase, but not where it comes from. It would also explain a lot about Gregory's robotic origins. Now, that admittedly seems like a stretch, but stick with me. During our initial playthrough of Security Breach, I called out the strange presence of staff bots in 2 major secret rooms. First, staff bots are either mangled or fully dismantled in the secret daycare room. A lot of disassembled staff bots. I mean, this one's been beat up, kind of like torn apart. This is a room that we theorized could probably be Gregory's hideout, considering that we see t-shirts hanging up alongside the walls, kind of like you would a closet, as well as the pictures that label a small child as me also posted on the walls. You know, looking back on this room almost a year later, there's another picture in here, my fun day, with a big old birthday cake and me labeled right next to it. Just saying, the connections between this kid and FNAF 4's failed birthday party keep stacking up. Anyway, lots of weird beat up staff bots exist in here in a way that they don't appear practically anywhere else in in the game. The second place that we see beat up staff bots is in the most lore-heavy room in the game, the post-it room down in the sewers. At the time, I was focused on the messages on the post-its, with the one binary one that translates to "Why is I?" This is what led me down the path of Gregory being a robot, and that the message was his first step into consciousness. But post-its aren't the only thing that are in that room. There are also hundreds of broken staff bot heads that are piled along the walls, not endoskeleton parts, specifically staff bots. At the time, I proposed that Gregory might have just been experimenting with the parts. It was just kind of a throwaway comment. But now, thanks to Jessica's connection to a mop bot, I feel like maybe the staff bots and Gregory might be more related than I initially thought. He's asking, "Why is I?" because his actual memories as the crying child are only just beginning to come back, clashing against the programming of the staff bot who was never truly alive in the first place. And it's why there are all these pieces of broken staff bots up in the daycare room. If he needs a repair, he can just use those parts because they're exactly what he's made from. Gregory has been pieced together with the parts of broken staff bots. All we need now to prove it is the heart-shaped pendant that lies underneath his striped shirt, which means it's time we talk about the other child we see in Security Breach. Theory number 3, the Security Breach DLC will be the official end of the Afton saga.
I always come back.
Nope, not this time, my friend. I feel real confident about this one. How do I know? Well, it all comes back to color. Color has always been hugely important to the franchise. Slightly confusing at times, but important nonetheless. So rather than looking at the poster for hidden eyes up in the corners or trying to figure out why Gregory might be on a computer monitor, I instead wanted to bring your attention to 2 specific color clues that have been given through this poster. First of all, the title. Take a look at that new logo we got. Security Breach Ruin. Security Breach, as you'd expect, is just the main game logo, but Ruin is purple. Well, this franchise is known for its use of bright colors, especially in the Neon Pizzaplex. Purple is always reserved for the Aftons. Obviously, both William and Michael are purple. In the Princess Quest ending, both Vanessa and Gregory are purple. Burntrap's room is purple, and so are his eyes. Purple is Afton's color. And so, with a purple logo and a room filled with purple lights, I have a feeling that what I predicted at the end of my last theory might come to pass. With Afton being absorbed by the blob, he's gonna take control of it, and it'll be up to us to put an end to him once and for all. But how? We've used fire 3 times at this point, and it's never once worked, so what else can we do? Well, we can use the girl on the poster. When I first looked at the poster, I knew that there was something fishy about her. This is weird. Why'd you turn black and white? That's too suspicious. You don't color in one part of your asset and then leave the rest of it black and white. First of all, let's take a look at the only color that we have to work with here, the shoes. Those lights are pinky red, the same as the pink top of Elizabeth Afton, a little girl who happens to be close to Gregory's age. The girl in the poster also has pale hair, which would imply that it's blonde rather than brunette. There are definitely some level of physical similarities here, but Elizabeth, just like every other kid in this franchise, is dead. She got herself scooped by babies, so it can't possibly be her, right? Or can it? I suspect that the black and white palette may be just more than hiding her identity, but also informing us to how she's gonna be here in the first place. In media, making something black and white usually implies that it's something from the past, maybe before color television, or just remembering something, like Christopher Nolan's Memento. Elizabeth being in black and white while the rest of the image is fully in color suggests that she is, in some way, a memory from the past. Now, I theorized last time that to beat Afton and his agony, you'd have to do what the Stitch Wraith did back in Fazbear Frights. You'd have to go inside his mind, find the good memories within the agony, and make the good memories stronger, essentially trapping the person within the happy memories to help the agony disappear. So if this is Elizabeth, well, then that's probably why she's in black and white. She's a construct of when she was alive in Afton's memories. In the end, we might not be exploring the real ruins of the Pizzaplex in the DLC, but rather the ruins of Afton's own mind. A jumbled mix of rage and sadness, pizzerias spread across time and space, a life that has fallen to ruin. If I'm right, the DLC could be an exploration of every other key point in the timeline of these games, as we, the memory of Elizabeth, try to put our father to rest once and for all. And honestly, it makes sense for the narrative at this point. Afton was absorbed by the blob. The blob is a collection of anger from all of his past victims. For the first time, the two are truly interacting, fusing together. It's the narrative excuse to bring killer and killed together to explore the memories of those moments and finally give everyone peace. Or revenge, one of the two. So there you have it, Steel Wool. I wrote your ending for you. You forced Afton upon us in Security Breach when we all thought he was gone, so you might as well do him some justice and give him the ending he deserves. This is the end of Burntrap and the Blob, closing the book on the Afton saga for good, allowing for a fresh start in the next project, because it's finally time to give the fans what they really want, an AR game that curses the world into a debilitating illness and turns babies into Fazgoo. You know what? On second thought, maybe we just don't adapt that story for the games. But hey, that's just a theory. 3 game theories. Thanks for watching. What if I told you that everything we thought we knew about Fnaf was a lie? That Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy were never possessed? That the bite of 87 never happened? Heck, that the bite of 83 never happened? What if I told you that William Afton didn't die because some spirits harassed him in a back room, but because he got careless and wet? What if I told you that Golden Freddy never existed? You would all think that I was crazy, right? That after 60 episodes covering this series that I'd finally lost it, or gotten so desperate that I needed you to throw it all away and start again for content. But I assure you, I'm still here. Totally sane, or yes, as sane as I've ever been, and totally suspecting that some, maybe even all of the statements that I just made are 100% true. So open your ears and listen to what I have to say, because once I'm done, none of us will look at this franchise the same way again. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where... Am I the only one that hears that weird humming sound? I think it's coming from the subscribe button. Can you help me smash it? Oh, thank goodness, that was driving me insane. What's this small disc that fell out? Yep, probably not important. Today is a big day as far as FNAF theory goes. Usually I'm here picking apart details from the newest book, or trying to solve one very specific part of the franchise's history, or reminding you that robot kids do in fact exist and Gregory is one of them. But this episode has a wider scope. It's bigger. It touches literally everything released in the franchise thus far. I don't know if I agree with today's theory or not. I don't even know if I like today's theory or not. Scratch that, I do know. Kinda hate it, and what it means for the franchise. But regardless of whether you agree or disagree, love it or hate it, I am asking you to keep an open mind about it, because this one feels important. And the implications of it, if true, would certainly result in the biggest shakeup for the series since the conclusion of FNAF 6. Today, I'm asking you to take everything that you thought you knew about FNAF 1, 2, 3, and 4. Possessed animatronics, the crying child, the missing children's incident, the entire existence of Golden Freddy. Take all of that and burn it to the ground. Maybe not burn it. We've seen that tends not to work. Take it all and put it through a paper shredder or something, will ya? Because none of it matters. None of it. It's all wrong. Or maybe it isn't. But before I explain why, I have to tell you that brand new holiday theory wear is available right now. And while I might not be the hugest fan of the implications of today's theory, I am the hugest fan of the merch that we've got lined up for you. Starting off with the newest addition to my rainbow of jackets, turquoise. You guys know at this point that I love me some bright, colorful jackets, right? You may also know that a couple years ago I partnered with Creator Inc. to make my own ideal jacket. Vegan leather, zips on the pockets to keep them secure, a special interior pocket that's a little bit larger to fit a tablet or a Nintendo Switch, and overall a stylish, well-fitting, brightly colored jacket. And I gotta say, we hit it out of the park. It is indeed my favorite jacket. The only thing that I don't like about it is that it's only one color, and I want to be able to wear any color I want at any time I want. So this time we remade the jacket in a beautiful, vibrant turquoise. It's a color that I always wanted in jacket form but could never find in a store. So you know what? We just went out and chose it ourselves. So add this one to your collection, my friends. Gotta catch 'em all. Map Pack color jackets. Yep, that didn't fit in the cadence at all. Or, you know, maybe you prefer your jackets with a bit more lore. Well, if you need a jacket that screams, I love puzzle solving, get ready. We've got the next installment of our puzzle jacket line as well. The Quest Jacket Volume 3. It's not just a jacket, it's an experience. Basically, this thing is an escape room that you can wear. Complete the puzzle that's built into the various parts of this jacket and you win yourself a special prize. The Quest Jacket is something that was created by us. We are the only people crazy enough to make a wearable item that is also a series of puzzles and lore. In fact, we reached out to a couple of factories and they outright told us, no, we will not make this jacket for you because we are asking them to print things in places where you don't normally print. It is just very complicated to make these jackets. There's a reason we're the only people to do them, and I think you're gonna have a blast with this one because there's even more challenging puzzles to solve and a much more fashionable design, making this one more wearable than quest number 1. So, are you ready to uncover the mystery and save the galaxy? Good luck, Space Ace. Believe it or not, though, we also have things that aren't jackets, like our 4-channel candle set. Ever wonder what the channels smell like? Probably haven't because, well, why would you? But dear viewer, smell-o-vision is finally a thing with these candles themed around each of our 4 channels. We've carefully constructed 4 signature scents that we think really help encapsulate each of the channels perfectly. Screen Fiend, which smells like red plum and cinnamon, witty banter with hints of jasmine and mint, mid-episode regret, very familiar with that one, but it smells of beautiful sandalwood, and my personal favorite, fresh lore, giving you that clean aroma of linen. These candles are made of soy, which means that they burn clean, and they also last for up to 40 hours. So if your gamer cave is starting to smell a bit too much like Doritos and Mountain Dew, these candles may just be your perfect get. Or if you want another way to set some mood lighting, check out our Game Theory Plasma Orb. We've harnessed the power of lightning and mixed in some game theory to turn it into our signature green. When you touch it, you are gonna feel like a super-powered mad scientist. And this is a big boy. Lots of the online plasma orbs tend to be small, but nope, we went with the jumbo size here, so you are harnessing a lot of lightning on your desk. Anyway, these are just a few of the items that we got going on. There's an awesome blanket, lounge pants, a t-shirt hoodie. There's even a Fnaf NASCAR jacket and a lava lamp. I did that thing where I said yes to too many merch ideas, but gotta be honest with you, I love them all so much. Oh, and also there's some film theory merch in there too. It's kind of cool, I guess. But all of it is waiting for you down in the description below, and you better do it quick before I decide to retcon it all out of existence. Speaking of retconning, back in 2019, we got the release of Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, otherwise known as Fnaf VR, a game that, to this day, ranks as my 3rd favorite from the franchise. On one hand, it was looking forward to the next phase of the series by introducing a new villain, Glitch Trap, but it also had its feet firmly planted in the past, a culmination of everything that had come before in a very literal way, by collecting the first 3 games and turning them into VR experiences. It really felt like an inflection point for the series, a transition from the old story of a serial killer in a haunted pizzeria to the new stories it had yet to tell about the killer living on through technology. But buried in the game were some lines that made everyone stop and go, huh? Right at the top, we got this moment.
We know that Fazbear Entertainment has developed something of a bad reputation, and while it's true that some stories associated with our name were loosely based on actual events, the majority of them were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. Lawsuits pending.
With the lunatic shown on screen being, of course, a picture of Scott Cawthon himself. It felt like good meme fodder, a funny meta joke that also poked fun at Fazbear Entertainment papering over their bloody history. But then the game chose to double down. In one of the game's hidden lore tapes, we learned more about this lunatic spreading lies about the Fazbear restaurants.
They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer. But that's not true at all. Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. It's an elaborate cover-up.
It was weird. It seemed like Fnaf VR was actively throwing into question everything we thought we knew about the franchise's lore. At the time, I went on the record to say this: if Fnaf VR's tapes are to be believed, pretty much everything we know could all be thrown out as complete fabrications. The long story short here is that Fnaf VR, in making Scott part of the Fazbear cover-up, is the franchise's way of rebooting the story. It's explicitly telling us that everything we've known up to this point is wrong. It's a distraction. And that's largely where the community left it. It was a bit of a weird call for the series to disregard everything that had come before, but honestly, it would have been fine. Here's the old original story arc with the first 6 games, and here's the new one moving forward. 2 separate story arcs told within the same universe. Fine. Until Security Breach came out. Suddenly, Springtrap was a key player again, and we were exploring the burned remains of the FNAF 6 location. And the idea of the first 6 games being the crazed ramblings of a hired lunatic were largely forgotten as we were thrust yet again back into the story of the Aftons. Business as usual, only this time, there was Music Man! So that was pretty much the status quo for the past year. But then, in late September, the unthinkable happened. We got another book. I know, I said the B word. I'm sorry, but stick with me, this one's different. You see, this one delivers on the hope that we've had for the books from the very beginning, that they would take small moments from the games and expand upon them to bring more clarity. Care to guess what moment from the games they chose to expand upon? The story of a rogue indie developer hired by Fazbear Entertainment to create a series of games covering up the company's shady past. And if there was any lingering doubt as to how this story fit into the games, the title was none other than Help Wanted. I'm about to summarize what exactly happens in the story, but the TLDR of it is exactly what we predicted back in 2019, that everything you thought you knew about the franchise is dead, just not exactly in the way that we thought, and it suddenly changes everything about how we should be approaching this franchise moving forward. In the story, we follow a character named Steve, an indie game developer stuck in a dead-end job while working on a, quote, fetch quest-based game featuring cartoony chipmunks. Now, what could that be a reference to, Scott? Just like we hear about in Fnaf VR, Steve is contacted by Fazbear Entertainment to create a series of games in order to help rebrand the company. At first, he turns down the offer. Not the company to take no for an answer, Fazbear then sets up an elaborate plot where they catfish Steve into a date with the woman of his dreams. During the date, he passes out, only to wake up and find that suddenly he's married to the woman and suffering from severe memory loss. This happens a few more times, waking up to discover that he now has children, or that the house he lives in is being foreclosed. Suddenly, in desperate need of money, he contacts Fazbear Entertainment and starts making games for him. 4 games, to be specific. All the while, a constant ringing is happening in his ears. Bit by bit, he becomes more sleep-deprived and paranoid, which then feeds into his games. At night, he's haunted by night terrors, horrific monsters that keep popping out of the walls, which only pushes him to work harder. And throughout it all, the ringing continues to build, rotting his brain. Eventually, Steve discovers what's going on. The high-pitched sound that he keeps hearing has been creating illusions used to gaslight him. His house, just a series of blank rooms. The night terrors, amusement park jump scares coming out of the walls. His beautiful family, robots with plastic faces and wheels. Their physical description actually sounds a lot like the staff bots. Steve is then given a choice of going back to the miserable real world or returning to the happiness that he felt inside the illusion. He chooses the illusion, giving his robot wife a hug, who then stabs him to death. Oh, also there's a DJ on the radio called DJ Dan, the Music Man. It's not important to the lore, it's just for the memes. It is a super sad story. It's also in no way a tale from the Pizzaplex, considering the place isn't mentioned once. But more than anything else, it's a story that confirms some of our greatest fears about the franchise. First and foremost, illusion discs are now officially a thing in the games. If you don't know what illusion discs are, then good for you. You clearly avoided reading the novels. I, however, not so lucky. Basically, these things use high-pitched noises to trick the human mind into creating intensely real illusions of things that aren't really there. A robot appears exactly like a human. A pizzeria is more decorated than it actually is. Characters turn practically invisible on camera. These are all ways that they've been used in the books, but up until this point, we've never had a reason to believe that they were in the game universe. The only time that I've suspected that they might be a thing in the games is this scene from Sister Location, when we remove a random flashing disc from Funtime Freddy's chest. It was just speculation at the time, but now, going back, listen to that scene.
The chest cavity should now be open. Remove the power module from the chest cavity. Great work.
You hear it? The buzzing? That humming is only present in scenes where we're directly interacting with an animatronic in close proximity. Just saying, there might have been more evidence to suggest that these things were actually in the games earlier than we thought, but hindsight's 2020. With this new story, we know it's valid technology, and that has huge implications for things that we see through security breach, like when we hear high-pitched ringing and have distorted vision anytime Vanny runs past us. Why Glamrock Freddy apparently can't see Vanny until he gets Roxy's eyes. It's all much more likely now because she's using illusion discs. It may also play into the mystery of who Patient 46 is. In Retro CD number 15, we hear this clip.
I have this still shot the text pulled from the security footage that recorded you in the Pizzaplex. That's you, isn't it? I know this image is distorted, but I think it looks like you're talking to someone. Or something. They almost look like rabbit ears.
One of the consistent features of the illusion discs is that they distort or blur any images that appear on camera. We see this all throughout the fourth closet. So the fact that the still image and the distortion are directly being called out here in the CDs indicate that Patient 46 may also be hiding behind an illusion disc. Who knows? If my guess was right and Gregory is meant to be Patient 46, that could be why he's appearing all blurry here in the camera shots from the DLC poster. Admittedly, that opens up its own can of worms and contradictions that would merit their own discussion. Like, why would he be clear in all these other pictures? I'm just tossing tossing it out as something for us to chew on. Much more importantly though, the Help Wanted story confirms that FNAF 1, 2, 3, and 4 are canonically video games within Freddy's fictional universe. They were created by a hired gun who, in the story, is confirmed to not be familiar with the events that happened at Freddy's. Quote from the story: "It took a few seconds for the name Fazbear to ring a bell, but then Steve remembered the kids' pizza places that once had been wildly
Yeah,
popular, but
Wendy's.
had suffered a downfall after a variety of criminal allegations. There had been talk of murders, though Steve didn't remember how many. There was weirder stuff too, stories about paranormal events and that kind of nonsense. Steve doesn't actually know the stories and events that took place. He doesn't remember how many kids died. He doesn't believe in paranormal activity. He is an unreliable narrator, which therefore puts everything in those first 4 games into question. He knew rumors of paranormal activity, so he created possessed animatronics. He knew about
Something like that.
murders, so he put in minigames depicting kids being murdered. As for the facts though, he cannot be trusted. And the story tries to make it crystal clear that FNAF 4 was largely of his own creation, born out of the torture that Fazbear was subjecting him to. As his hallucinations get more nightmarish, Steve starts seeing monsters literally appear out of the walls. One of them is described as follows, quote, "It was the head of something. It was small but bulbous and vain, its large eyes almond-shaped with cat-like pupils. It lunged forward from the hole in the wall and parted its jaws to reveal a mouthful of sharp-looking teeth. Its pointed tongue darted out like a snake's when it sniffed the air." This moment isn't just to show us Steve's torture, it's to show us the influence that it has on the games that he's making. Look at the description. Does it remind you of anything? A character with cat-like eyes, a long pointed tongue, sharp teeth, who likes to pop out unexpectedly? It's Nightmare Foxy from FNAF 4. Look at this picture from the teasers leading up into the game, especially the long pointed tongue. Who else pops out from the closet, from under the bed, from behind a TV in that game? Foxy. The book is spelling out for us why that game is so different, why it's no longer a game about Fazbear Pizzeria. The torture became so much that the story had shifted from being a Fazbear story to being a Steve story. 4 games, 1 story. It's the clue that Scott gave us a long time ago during a live stream after the release of FNAF 4. At first, I suspected the line was all about dream theory, that all of it was happening in the nightmares of a child, and I think that one was right. Then it shifted to the 4 games being about one family, the Aftons, as their kids grappled with the sins of their father, and I think that was also right. But now it's changed once again. It's now 4 games about one new story, Steve's story. The story of a game designer that was being gaslit by an evil robotics company. You know, I gotta hand it to Scott. It's actually impressive how many times he's been able to make that single phrase describe the same set of 4 games. It also means that Scott gets to have his cake and eat it too. He gets to make those first 4 games the equivalent of dream theory without it actually being a dream. Oh, was the puppet referred to as a he in FNAF 2? Steve didn't know. Were there 5 victims? 10? 15 in that first set of pizzerias? Don't know. Steve's just making his best guess. But most importantly of all, it means that anything that doesn't physically appear in or after Sister Location and beyond is suddenly cast into doubt. And when you think about it, that includes some major parts of the lore. For instance, we know that Michael Afton is in fact a security guard for Fazbear Entertainment at some point thanks to the security logbook. Plus, with Sister Location in FNAF 6, we know that he ends up getting scooped and dying in a fire. Sister Location also proves the existence of Elizabeth Afton and how she got scooped by Baby. But the 3rd Afton kid, Crying Child, he's never been mentioned in any other game other than FNAF 4. I've made theories suggesting that he's the other spirit communicating with Cassidy in the survival logbook, but you know, that's just speculation because I assume that he existed. In FNAF 6's Midnight Motorist, there's reason to believe that he's the one who broke out of the house, considering that Mike in the chair says he's had a hard night, but again, that is pretty weak evidence. Honestly, the closest we get to having physical evidence of his existence is in Security Breach's post-it room, where there's a dinner scene made up of 5 staff bots that appear to be simulating the Afton family, and one of those 5 is missing its head, which we've assumed represents the Crying Child getting chomped. But all of that evidence only stands because the Crying Child was thought to exist thanks to the first 4 games. Maybe that's why we've never actually gotten a name for him, because he was never meant to exist in the first place, and so Scott purposefully hid the name in order to allow the 5th Afton child's identity to remain anonymous. Ready for a big plot twist when it turns out that he has another child, maybe a daughter, maybe called Vanessa. It's speculative as all heck, I'm just throwing it out there as a consideration. Henry and Charlie are definitely in this universe. We see Charlie's death and possession of the puppet thanks to the minigames in FNAF 6, so that's all confirmed. But the missing children's incident where 5 kids were murdered at the FNAF 1 location? Unclear. It's likely that it happened, considering that in FNAF 6's Lorekeeper ending, we see 5 gravestones with one on a hill, the 5 missing children's incident victims plus Charlie, the 6 victims of William Afton. It's the same thing with Princess Quest. To move forward in the Princess Quest first minigame, you have to light 6 gravestones. So it seems like those 5 murders happened, but then what about the extra 5 dead bodies that we see appearing throughout the Fnaf 2 pizzeria? What about hearing that the pizzeria is getting closed down in the tapes? Even less clear. Fnaf VR's main ending proves that William Afton is still the main killer in this universe, and that he definitely stuffed kids into the animatronics. However, whether those kids go on to possess the animatronics is up for debate. Without the first 4 games being officially canon, we don't really have any evidence for their possession. But perhaps the biggest ripple effect of them all, this new understanding of the canonicity heavily suggests that Golden Freddy may never have existed. That's right, my favorite clickbait yellow boy may not actually be a thing in this franchise at all. Consider this, Golden Freddy, while seemingly this super important piece of the lore to the franchise, hasn't shown up in a major way in any recent titles. He's only ever shown up in titles with questionable canonicity, like Fnaf World, which is definitely not canon, Custom Night, which is Afton's personal hell, and Fnaf AR, which isn't really canon. And if you think it is, then both Shamrock Freddy and Chocolate Bonnie are canon, and I refuse to live in a world where that could possibly be true. But in the main games, nothing. In Sister Location, his name is used in a Custom Night challenge. In Fnaf 6, completely absent. And in Security Breach, sure, there's a golden Glamrock Freddy that you can collect, but there's a golden toy of every character that you can collect. In fact, I think Security Breach was outright trying to tell us that Golden Freddy has never been a thing. Of the dozens of collectibles that you can find throughout the game, plushies, figurines, keychains, sweaters, 4 of them actually seemed important. 3 posters from Fredbear's Family Diner, and an even older one from Fredbear's Singin' Show. The Singin' Show is, I don't know, man, it makes it look like the next game is gonna be a crossover with Bendy and the Ink Machine. But the Fredbear's Family Diner ones are the ones that I want to focus on now. Look at these things. One of them has the golden Bonnie with a purple bow tie, just like you'd expect. But the other 2 show us a brown bear with a black hat and a black bow tie. And you see, that is a huge detail. Up until this point, we've been under the impression that there were only 2 mascots at Fredbear's Family Diner, Golden Bonnie and Golden Freddy. In Fnaf 3, we see a Golden Bonnie and Golden Freddy performing together on stage. Similarly, in Fnaf 4, we see Golden Bonnie and Golden Freddy again. It was always those 2 together, with other characters like Foxy and Chica not showing up until later. So why then in Security Breach would they show us regular Freddy as the one on the Fredbear posters? Unless he is Fredbear. It's everything that we've been talking about today. Our evidence for Golden Freddy is all founded upon the original 4 Fnaf titles, games made by a guy whose brain was slowly turning to mush. But when you actually stop and look for the physical evidence of who Fredbear was in the games that are still considered to be canon, all we get is a brown bear. Golden Freddy was never real. He never existed. I know, it seems wild, but it actually helps answer a lot of questions that we've had about Golden Freddy throughout this franchise. First off, his wildly inconsistent appearance. In both Fnaf 1 and 2, he appears gold with a black hat and bow tie. But in the Fnaf 2 minigame showing Charlie being killed outside Fredbear's Family Diner, the Freddy we play as is brown with a black hat, more similar to the Fredbear that we see in the posters for Security Breach. In the Fnaf 3 minigame that apparently shows us Fredbear's Family Diner, he goes back to being gold with a black hat. But then in Fnaf 4's minigame, he's shown to be gold with a purple hat and bow tie. His appearance has never remained consistent, which could make sense if these are games being made by a guy who's under extreme duress. If Golden Freddy isn't around, then who could have done the bite of 83? Well, it could be that that never happened. We've never seen a gravestone for Crying Child after all. If Golden Freddy doesn't exist, then where does Cassidy's soul reside? Well, again, we still don't have any proof that the original missing children actually possessed any animatronics. All their souls may have just moved on or been immediately converted into Remnant. Cassidy only really appears in Ultimate Custom Night, so either their spirit is attached to Afton's like Andrew's is in the Fazbear Fright series, or it's just William torturing himself over the memory of this one child that he murdered in cold blood. Long story short, I still haven't fully worked out the ramifications of all this, and I'd love your help working through it, because this revelation about the first 4 games being games demands a whole new way of looking at the series. The ripple effects of this revelation are huge, and casts even more doubt into stuff that we thought that we knew about the games. I mean, with all the new books and games and revelations that we've had since the release of Security Breach, I've been meaning to do a state of the lore video for a while, just to make sure that we're all operating on the same page of what is true and what isn't true. Because at this point, it's hard for even me to keep track of what we've proved, what's only speculation, all of that. And after episodes like today, that sort of video feels more important than ever. So keep an eye out for that one in the next couple of weeks, which means that I'm back to researching Fnaf from square one. And I thought we were done with the scary season. But hey, at least while I'm pulling my hair out, I can look good doing it thanks to my new Game Theory merch, which, just as one final reminder, is linked down in the description of this video. So grab yourself a jacket, a hoodie, one of the other jackets. Testing, testing. Oh boy, you're not gonna like this one, but I think we're right. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that started so many flame wars, you'd think we were a pizzaplex. So right now I'm in the middle of re-examining every piece of Fnaf lore the series has ever produced in order to construct a definitive timeline for the series. Or, I suppose, as definitive as possible for the series, considering, it's Fnaf. That means that me and Tom and head editor Dan are combing over every misleading teaser, every line of hidden website source code, every page of the novels and their accompanying graphic novels, and every questionable skin from Fnaf AR from Big Chungus Springtrap to Statue of Liberty Chica. Because nothing says America quite like rebranding a national monument with a giant toga-wearing murder chicken shilling for pizza. And our forefathers wept. Anyway, since this is an absolutely massive quest, we've broken the timeline down into 3 core chunks. Foundations of Freddy's, the Afton era, and post-Purple Guy. Basically everything that happens post-Springtrap getting torched in Fnaf 6. And while that timeline theory is still in the works, we've already made some discoveries. Some big and some small. And it's one of the bigger ones that brings us here today. You see, as we were rewatching all the cutscenes from Fnaf 6, we heard this line from the completion ending of the game.
Thank you for your participation. There is no need for you to return to work next week, as Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity.
Oh sure, everyone remembers the whole "don't keep the devil waiting" bit during that ending, but all of us tend to forget what comes after the fire. An acknowledgement that Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity. When Henry dies in that fire, the game makes it clear that the company dies with him. But that doesn't make any sense knowing what we know now. In Fnaf VR, AR, and Security Breach, Fazbear Entertainment is alive and still very much running. In fact, the company seems stronger than ever, building a giant mega pizzaplex that towers over anything the company's ever done before. So what gives? A dissolved company can't be going around making new games, and they certainly aren't building new 80s inspired animatronics, are they? All of it seems to imply that someone restarted the company between Fnaf 6 and Fnaf VR. And it was that single, simple observation, my friends, that led us down a rabbit hole I believe may have solved another core part of Security Breach's endlessly frustrating story. First, we wanted to prove to ourselves that this corporate restart was a real thing. Throughout the core gameplay of Fnaf 6, if you buy and display animatronics with a high liability rating, you get a chance to experience a fun little mechanic known as being sued. You go through these lawsuits and decide whether to pay a lawyer to fight for you or just pay the listed amount to settle the case. It's a fun, quirky gameplay mechanic that fits with the humor of the franchise. However, there's a detail within these lawsuits that's important. If you take a look at the names at the top of each lawsuit, you'll see that the defendant is listed as Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. Those last 3 letters are important. That INC there means that Fazbear is an incorporated company. It means that Fazbear Entertainment has shareholders, people that own stocks within the company. There are also 2 different types of corporations, S-Corps, which tend to be smaller, and C-Corps, which tend to be bigger. Trust me, you don't really want to know any of that, nor do you need to know any of it for this theory. I just bring it up because it's knowledge that Steph and I have accumulated over the last decade of doing this work as business owners, and I just wanted it to be validated at some point in my life. Anyway, useless business information aside, as we hear at the end of Fnaf 6, Fazbear Entertainment, Inc. has been dissolved.
Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity.
We can assume that Henry, in his final act before sacrificing his life, dissolved any and all ownership remaining in the company so it would die with him, which is why it's so weird that suddenly it's back. And not just back, but back in a completely new form. In Security Breach, if you check out the Balloon Boy arcade cabinet above the daycare, on the title screen you'll find that the copyright is now owned by a brand new company, Fazbear Entertainment, LLC. Again, those last 3 letters there are important. They stand for Limited Liability Company. Basically, it means that the owners of the business aren't shareholders, but rather one or a small group of individuals that can't be held responsible for the debts of the business. For instance, if the Fazbear business took out a small loan of $1 million but couldn't pay it back, the banks couldn't then approach Henry or William's personal money demanding repayment. LLC members also aren't usually responsible for the co-owner's negligence or wrongdoing, which again, knowing the history of this company, is probably gonna be a better business arrangement. Most importantly of all though, LLCs tend to be smaller, held by one or a few individuals rather than a collection of shareholders. And this actually explains a lot. If you go for the Afton ending of Security Breach, you go down the elevator only to discover the Fnaf 6 pizzeria underneath the whole thing. Try explaining that decision to your shareholders. We're just gonna build our new mall on top of that old burnt down pizzeria. That'll rake in the big bucks. How about the fact that we get messages on the Faz Watch from building contractors concerned about building a giant mall over the equivalent of a sinkhole? Again, this doesn't feel like something you'd be able to do if the company had shareholders, but if the business is owned by a single individual, they could essentially do whatever they wanted. They don't have to answer to anyone. In short, there is strong evidence to suggest that someone has restarted the Fazbear brand under this new corporate entity. But who would do that? Why would they do that? Was I just chasing down a lead that didn't matter? No, because I wasn't the only one asking the question. In December of 2021, this book was released, the Fnaf Ultimate Guide. Basically your one-stop shop for anything important to the franchise, written by the man himself, Scott Cawthon, and only Scott Cawthon. This thing is robust. It contains every scrap of dialogue, every game mechanic, a summary of every Fazbear fright, and a description for practically every one of the nearly 150 characters introduced into the franchise. If it ain't in here, it probably ain't worth your brain space. And if the book explicitly calls something out, well, it's probably gonna be worth a look. And wouldn't you know it, but in the Fnaf AR description of the glitch trap virus, we get this quote. The cease work order from the Fazbear Entertainment Office of Legal Affairs seems to indicate that the company at some point becomes aware of the problem and tries to stop it. That leaves one question. Just who is running the company? And it was here that I knew that I was onto something. The fact that the Ultimate Guide felt the need to point it out made me realize that this is absolutely something that we need to be solving. The clues are in place for us. It was now time for us to put it all back together. So let's figure out who's running the show over at the new improved Fazbear Entertainment LLC, shall we? Well, let's consider what exactly that person is doing. First and foremost, they're building a brand new location over the remains of the old Fnaf 6 location. That right there is a huge red flag. Why not just bulldoze the whole thing and build a new one? Unless, of course, they know what's down there. Because remember, underneath it all lies the heart and soul of this franchise, Afton. They are choosing to build their new location on top of his literal gravesite. The head of this new Fazbear Entertainment LLC wants access to him. And as we see at the end of the game, it seems like their goal is to bring him back to his former glory. But just having access to Afton's body isn't enough. This person wants more. We know that the head of Fazbear Entertainment LLC has been actively taking an interest in Vanessa becoming head of security, despite her having no qualifications for the position. We know this based on in-game messages. Quote, interview notes. As requested, here are my notes on today's Chief Security Officer interview. While Vanessa seemed eager and bright, she doesn't appear to have any relevant background experience. I realize the recommendation came from the top, but we need someone who's run security for a facility of this scale. I do not recommend her for this position. Based on this email, Vanessa should have never gotten the position, but note that it's marked for deletion. Someone wanted to hide the poor interview performance. Someone at the top. In yet another email, we see this. Quote again, new hire summary, head security guard, no prior qualifications, internal reference, name withheld. The person putting Vanessa forward for the job is trying to stay anonymous. But hold on, why would someone want to hire Vanessa despite her limited experience? Well, the only really special thing about her is that she's possessed by Glitch Trap. So if someone's trying to bring Afton back, preserving his body underneath the Pizzaplex, it makes sense to get someone into the Pizzaplex who houses the only other part of Afton that remains, his consciousness, in the form of the Glitch Trap virus. But who would possibly want to bring a serial killer back to life? I mean, think about what this person has done. They've restarted an entire company, they've hired third parties to scan old circuit boards, they've rebranded the franchise, built a mall, and then doctored emails to hire someone, all in an effort to resurrect Afton. Who would do that? Who would go to that level of extreme? Can't be Vanessa, she can't hire herself. Can't be Michael, he's always trying to get rid of Afton. Can't be Henry, he dissolved the company in the first place. Can't be Gregory because he's trying to destroy the animatronics. But there is someone it can be.
I will make you proud, Daddy.
The only person who would be that motivated to bring Afton back to life. The one person that through all of the games they've appeared in has been on Afton's side wanting to keep his vision alive. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I submit to you that Elizabeth Afton is the one in control of the new Fazbear Entertainment LLC. I guess you could call her the boss baby. I will now pause and give you a chance to write your collective groans, frustrations, and general vitriol down in the comments. While you're doing that, let me quickly remind you that right above that fiery comment section is our merch shelf, where it's your last chance to pre-order our new ARG jacket, the puzzle that you wear. Once that thing's gone, it is gone forever. So get your orders in this weekend. But you know what? If you don't want the hassle of solving your clothes, and you just want to be snugly and warm this holiday season, might I suggest some of our other holiday items that we have in stock right now, including the Dreamweave blanket and the Pixel Player lounge pant and hoodie. They're snuggly, they're warm, they make it look like you just stepped out of an 8-bit minigame. Place your orders now so that way you get them in time for Christmas. All right, Alright, you done venting in the comments? Told you this one would make you mad. Let's see what you wrote. And yes, I'm doing this from the past. But Elizabeth is dead. Baby's eyes are blacked out in the blob. She died in Fnaf 6. Yep, all of those are perfectly valid. I know it sounds insane, believe me. No one recognizes that more than me. But I ask you, when has any character that's meant to be dead in this franchise ever stayed dead? Let's just look at the facts, shall we? Our second ever theory on this game drew attention to all the similarities between Elizabeth Afton and Vanessa. They both like flowers, they both have an abusive and manipulative father named William A, and of course, there's the blonde hair and green eyes. However, we've never been able to actually figure out how these two characters are connected beyond them just being similar. Could it just be another instance of this franchise doing what I like to call pulling a Jeremy? That's using the same detail multiple times just to confuse us. But you see, there's a bit more that's suspicious about Vanessa. There's one thing that me and every other theorist out there has been scared to tackle in this game, and it's this: Security Breach's fire escape ending. In it, Glamrock Freddy yeets Vanny off the top of a burning pizzaplex, sending both of them to their death. Gregory pulls off the Vanny mask to reveal that it was Vanessa the whole time! A twist that surprised literally no one. Except after the credits, we pan up to the roof to see security guard Vanessa looking down as the building burns around her. Excuse me, what? Two Vanessas? Everyone just kind of collectively hand-waved this away. It must be a hallucination. Maybe it's her spirit still trapped in the pizzaplex. Or maybe, just maybe, Vanny and Vanessa have always been two separate individuals. Two twin sisters. Hold on.
In Security Breach Fury's Rage, we get VR sisters. That's one of the bosses in Fury's Rage. And I think it could be possible that one of the sisters, maybe Vanessa, went to go save her other sister after being taken over by Glitchtrap.
Recently, a new theorist has entered the ring with some pretty interesting things to say about Security Breach. John from the YouTube channel Fnaf. And while I was busy coining the catchphrase, Music Man, he was busy in his corner preaching the gospel of the VR sisters. Remember them? Of course you don't. Why would you? So let me refresh your memory. In case you've forgotten, Security Breach got delayed a lot. I mean, a lot. And at one point, Scott Cawthon, worried that the fan base would be upset about the repeated delays, decided to release a short little meme game to tide us all over. A beat-em-up title called Fury's Rage.
The fan base, when they find out that I have to delay the game again, they're gonna kill me. What am I gonna do? I know. I'll make a game for them.
4 straightforward levels with a secret boss at the end, punching through waves of the franchise's most forgettable enemies: Freddy Frostbear, Clown, Springtrap, Radioactive Foxy, L-Chip. And the rest of the enemies are just variations of Chica, the Puppet, Mangle, Baby. As for the bosses, most of them are jokes. Sure, you've got Vanny, but there's also Mega Brow, which is just Brow Boy from Fnaf World. There's Soul Brawler, which is a reference to one of Scott's earlier game characters, Soul Dozer. And the secret final boss of the game, Dreamgeist, basically a giant troll about fan theories. And yet, in this game full of memes and tongue-in-cheek references, there's one set of characters that don't quite fit. The first level's boss, the VR sisters. They're the only truly original characters for this game. Literally everyone else you can point to and understand what the reference is. Now that is weird. Why would Scott put the time and effort into designing them, coming up with a name, and purposely putting them in there for us to look at if they weren't important in some way? With Vanessa being taken over by the Glitchtrap virus in Fnaf VR, makes sense for this to be in relation to her in some way. She's a VR sister. And then her having a twin sister would explain why there could be a second Vanessa at the top of a burning building during the ending. What is it that John's been saying lately in his theory vids?
Need more proof?
Yeah, I do. You probably do too. Luckily, I have it for you. Once you get to level 4 of Fury's Rage, you find yourself in some sort of factory surrounded by conveyor belts and magnets holding up humanoid robot torsos. In the end, you fight Vanny and the game ends. But wait, before you get to the boss battle, there's one very crucial detail in the level that everyone overlooked: an orange pod with a female figure sitting inside. I've seen enough sci-fi to know that right there is a birthing pod, and the figure inside looks an awful lot like Baby from the Fourth Closet graphic novel. That's right, friendos, it's time once again for everyone's favorite segment. Matt Pat uses the lore of multiple FNAF books to explain parts of the game that make no sense. In the Fourth Closet, Baby's origins take a weird turn. She's actually a robot built by Henry to help replace his daughter Charlie after her death. You see, Henry creates a robot for each stage of his daughter's life: toddler, child, teenager, and finally adult. In his mind, this would allow her to grow up with everyone else around her. And this gave us our first confirmed instance of robot kids being a thing inside of the series. Robots that are capable of bleeding, eating, feeling cold. And here's the weirdest twist of them all. Baby is the final adult form of Charlie, which, let's just say I have some strong feelings about. People hate when I talk about the books. The books tell you the rough guidelines or rough rules of the universe. When you look at the books and there's this repeated thing of creators building robot kids, okay, well, apparently that's fair game. And then to take it one insane logical step further and say, not only are they building robotic versions of kids, but multiple versions of robotic kids at different ages, I would say you are insane. That's so stupid. It is a weird thing for them to do, and it challenges realism to such an absurd degree. Yeah. That you're like, yeah, and no one's noticing that this person that they're interacting with and that bleeds. Again, because they bleed in the books, that bleeds, no one is noticing that this person doesn't age, but is still also eating in order to survive, but is also like perfectly passable as a human in every other way, shape, and form. That's crazy. And then the books layer on, and it's also Baby, who is a robot clown. And you're like, that's so stupid. I feel like no wonder people think that the theories that we produce are insane, because it is, but we're just telling you what the books say. Welcome to the books, I guess. What's also interesting is that in the books, it's clear that previous versions of the robot humans don't have to stop working or die in order for newer, more grown-up models to activate. Both teenage Charlie and adult Charlie, aka Baby, are walking around, totally sentient with their own goals and motivations. One wanting to live a normal life, completely unaware that she's a robot, and the other looking to kill children in service of William Afton, bitter because she's a robot. Sounds a lot like the relationship between a certain young security guard and her twin sister Murder Rabbit. Now, while we have no evidence to really support Charlie being rebuilt in the game lore like she was in the books, it does seem like Elizabeth may have multiple sisters of herself running around. In the words of John, who first proposed this one a year ago,
it could be very well possible that once Elizabeth died, William Afton not too soon after rebuilt her and built different ages of her throughout the years, just like we see in the books in robot form. So that could be VR sisters, two different versions of the same person.
You know what? I think he's right. At the time, we didn't have the evidence, but now I think he was ahead of his time. Move over, Gregory. There's a new robot human in town, and her name is Elizabeth Afton, and Vanessa, and Vanny, and probably the head of Fazbear Entertainment LLC too. All iterations of the same person from different life stages. All Elizabeth Afton. Some aware of who they really are, and some not. And one of those versions is Ruined DLC Girl. In some of Security Breach's cut dialogue, there are laugh lines that are definitely feminine, but also some that clearly mix in a young girlish tone. Hear that last one? Clearly there's a childish girl laugh with a bit of a British accent mixed in there, exactly like the voice of Elizabeth from Sister Location. Sites like the Cutting Room Floor attribute these as cut Vanny lines, which makes sense considering that there aren't many human females in the game, but that laugh seems awfully young for Vanessa, or Vanny. And that's not all. Going back to Fury's Rage, notice the shoes on the VR sisters, specifically the cool purple sneakers. I could have sworn that they had matched the design of the blonde girl's light-up sneakers in the Ruined DLC poster, but upon closer inspection, yeah, it was close, but not strong enough of a match for me to call it out in a theory. Dead end, right? No. Notice the two colors on those shoes, red and purple. Very specific shades of red and purple. And what's the coloring of our two VR sisters? Red and purple. Seems that maybe, just maybe, this blonde girl is also part of the Elizabeth sisters. So that would actually give us our 4 closets. Baby, the original, young girl Elizabeth in the Ruined DLC, Vanessa, the 23-year-old security guard according to the Fnaf AR emails, and Vanny, who, you know, just might be slightly older. Her being a robot would also explain how she survived a massive fall from the top of a pizzaplex without being totally disfigured. Personally, I think this would actually be a pretty cool idea, having all the versions of Elizabeth come together. This child, Vanny, Vanessa, maybe even the original Baby would show up to complete the tribe of robot Elizabeths. But doesn't all of this disprove my initial theory? If Vanny is the adult version of Elizabeth, then doesn't that mean we're out of Elizabeths to run Fazbear Entertainment LLC? We've filled all 4 of our closets. Well, not quite. Because when you get to the very end of that final book, Charlie's love interest, John, stands by Charlie's grave after all the other known versions of her have died. He looks up and sees none other than yet another, slightly older version of Charlie standing in front of him. I kind of just wrote this off initially as a cute ending, but in the wake of what we've been talking about this whole time, it reveals that there were never just 4 closets. There were never just 4 versions of Charlie. There were more. Potentially an infinite number of them, which honestly makes sense. Can't have a a 20-something-year-old Charlie looking 20 forever, she too would need to age up to look like a woman in her 30s, her 40s, her 50s. This idea is also shown in Fury's Rage. While the VR sisters are the first bosses, after you defeat them, they become regular enemies during the 3rd level. There are dozens of them that come out to attack you, one after the other after the other, new ones being built to achieve their purpose. Other bosses don't do that in the game. And in stage 4, those humanoid robot torsos hanging from the ceiling, they look a little bit more on the feminine side to me. Robot women being built by the boatload, ready to replace the ones that we destroy, be they VR sisters or security guards or murderous rabbits. And at the top of the food chain is an older, wiser, more vengeful version of Elizabeth pulling the strings, looking to bring her family of robots all back together to the same place. I suppose you could say that that makes the Pizzaplex the true sister location. But hey, say all you want about Elizabeth's business practices, you gotta admit, she knows how to dress up a joint. I've always loved how the Pizzaplex looks. That 80s neon style just hits the nostalgia button hard for me. Fortunately, the metal posters from our sponsor Displate are here to scratch that very itch. Now I'm able to have all those bright neon colors fill in the office even when we're not focusing on Fnaf's ridiculous lore. No joke, we actually had a bunch of our team come over to our home base in Raleigh recently and quickly realized that we hadn't decorated the place. So we headed on over to Display to add some much needed style to our blank walls. Now our team isn't just walking into a blank office, they're heading into the gaming zone. And what's great about Displate posters is that they're super durable. They're made out of a high quality metal, which means that they're not gonna tear, they're not gonna rip, they do not fade ever. I've gotten so many posters from Displate over the years, and despite a cross-country move and several redecorating sessions, these things look just as good and just as vibrant as they did when I first got them. And thanks to Displate's huge library of metal posters, whatever your preferred aesthetic is, you are bound to find a number of designs that really speak to who you are. Maybe you prefer some posters of flowers, or ice cream, or, you know, anything that doesn't constantly remind you of killer animatronics that destroyed your family. And then when you change your mind and you want to switch up your aesthetic, great! Displate's signature magnet hanging technology means there's no need to get out the tool belt to start punching more holes in your wall. You simply take off the old poster and put the new one up. It is as simple as swapping out a refrigerator magnet. If only solving this franchise were so simple. Using Displate posters to decorate your space is easy, it's straightforward, they look great, and it saves you so much time, so there's always room for just one more game. And I haven't even told you the best news, friends. Displate is now offering you theorists their biggest discount ever. If you want to buy 1 to 2 posters, you're about to get yourself 35% off, which is pretty darn impressive. If you get 3 to 4 posters, that's 39% off your order. Normally, that's where our deal would end, but just like with Fnaf, it keeps going. Because if you're like me and you just ordered 5 or more posters, well, my friends, you are going to get 44% off that order. That means that you're going to have plenty of money left over in your pockets to rebuild any failing pizza chain restaurants that you want, or, you know, just afford a couple more extra presents this holiday season. Just head on down to the description and click the link there to get that special discount only available to you theorists, which will then be automatically applied to your cart at checkout. But you better be quick, it's only for a limited time, so jump on that deal like an animatronic jumping at your face. Once again, head on down to the description to get my limited time discount and start building your dream space today. And as always, my friends, remember, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. I've done it. I've solved Fnaf. And the clue that brings it all together is this.
Don't you hate getting killed by obscure secondary characters?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where today I'm just gonna get straight to the point. This episode was supposed to be our final timeline, but you know what? It's not quite there yet. I think we're gonna have it ready for next week. There's just a few wrinkles that we need to iron out about Elizabeth's death specifically, but otherwise, I feel really good about everything we've pieced together so far. That said, I wanted to put this episode up first regardless, because it dives into a section of the timeline that's likely gonna be controversial, which is also a bad thing because it's the beginning of the timeline. Nothing like starting off on the wrong foot, you know? So in order to head that one off at the pass, let's just start talking about it now, shall we? Last episode, I brought up how the team and I have been tackling this whole timeline project. Basically, that we've broken down everything into 3 key sections: the foundation of Freddy's, the Afton era, and post-Purple Guy. In that episode, we dug hard into the last chunk, trying to figure out the recent history with things like Fnaf VR and Security Breach. But even trickier is the first chunk, the foundation of Freddy's. You see, at this point, we all have a general basic knowledge of the games, right? Kids die, animatronics get possessed, all that good stuff. But here, that foundational stuff right at the beginning, that's the murkiest, because honestly, there's not a lot that's immediately clear that we can go off of. Sure, there's a couple of lines from Phone Guy, maybe a sentence or two from the novels, but otherwise, it seems to be about it. How did William Afton and Henry Emily start working together? Were they rivals? Why did Afton start killing in the first place? Was Fredbear's Family Diner truly the first location? These are questions that seem important for us to answer, and honestly, if you're looking at where the timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's really begins, it's with those sorts of questions. The only problem is that the answers just might not exist anywhere in the canon yet. Or so I initially thought, which brings us to today's episode. I suspect that there may be a way to answer some, if not all of those questions using a mix of evidence from the games, the books, and real-life lore. In the process, I think it'll help us get a better understanding of William Afton's motives, while also outlining a rough sequence of events that'll ultimately help place locations and other things when I tackle the full timeline of the series next week. And all of it hinges on one thing: a set of obscure secondary characters named the Mediocre Melodies. Orville Elephant, Ned Bear, Pig Patch, Happy Frog, and of course, Mr. Hippo.
Sometimes a story is just a story. You try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Hippo, I get it. That has been leveled at me more times than I can count. But I think in this case, we actually didn't read into you enough. You see, when the Mediocres were first introduced in Pizzeria Simulator, we, as the community, largely dismissed them. And why wouldn't we? This is a game where you're pulling animatronics out of a dumpster. Trash and the gang are literally made of garbage. Why would we think that some random barnyard-themed characters would be worth our attention when there was already so much established lore inside of the thing? We beat the game, we solved the lore, we moved on. Then Ultimate Custom Night released, and there they were again. It was strange to see him fill so many slots, but I don't know, there was also Trash in the gang, and Music Man! Other random pulls from the character deep cuts, so maybe it was just Scott trying to fill out the roster. But then something unexpected happened. Well, they were mostly treated as a joke. If you died to them, every once in a while they'd give voice to the most important character and mystery from the game, the one you shouldn't have killed, Cassidy.
We've only just begun. I will never let you leave. I will never let you rest.
It was a huge revelation, and the lines that they spoke ultimately helped us to determine that Custom Night was William Afton's endless torment at the hands of the spirits inside the Golden Freddy suit. But again, none of us ever stopped to consider why them? Why these characters? Why were they the ones that Cassidy was choosing to speak through? Why are they here? Well, after doing a lot of research for the grand overall timeline, now I think I know. The Mediocre Melodies were Henry's creation from a time before he and William started working together. When the two men merged their ideas together to form one company, the Mediocres became temporary characters at Fredbear's Family Diner before eventually being retired and largely forgotten. Oh yeah! That is a lot of big swings that I'm making with some massive assumptions, so let's just rewind and take it one step at a time, shall we? First, how do we know that the Mediocre Melodies belong to Henry? Well, let's just look at their design. It's very simple. They're similar to the Endo 01 designs from the Fnaf 1 animatronics, but even more rudimentary, with less flexible joints and less complex wiring. But the important point here is that for each one, the upper jaw and the lower jaw are entirely separate, operating using a very basic hinge towards the back of the head, or two metal bars that slide up and down along the side. And you see, that right there is what tells us they belong to Henry. Well, there are plenty of animatronics that fall into a nebulous zone of who designed them. There are a few pieces of tech that we can definitely trace back to their original creator. The Funtime animatronics, for instance, definitely came from Afton. Not only were they designed with the intent of luring and capturing children, something that just doesn't jive with Henry, but the blueprints outright have Afton Robotics written in the corner. Not much you can do to deny that one. Sound illusion discs? Another Afton creation, considering the backs of them are stamped with his company name as we see in the graphic novels. But the one I'm most interested in today is Lefty, the animatronic designed by Henry used to capture his daughter the puppet during Fnaf 6. That was clearly not an Afton project. This was purely Henry's doing in secret. So, knowing Knowing that, did you happen to notice the two straight metal rods in the schematics with the jaw fully detached from the top of the head? It's an exact match for the design of Happy Frog. It's a Henry signature. But why does that matter? Well, the designs of the mediocres also perfectly match up to the first generation of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica. We know that the Wizards were the earliest form of our Core 4 animatronics. These were the ones that had children stuffed inside of them and got possessed. They outright tell us this fact in Ultimate Custom Nights.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
But have you ever stopped to look at how the Wizards were constructed? They use the exact same techniques as the mediocre melodies. They have a full separation between the tops of their head and their jaws. Withered Freddy and Foxy both have the hinge opening in the back like we see with Pig Patch, and Withered Chica follows the Happy Frog and Lefty model with bars in the jaw to aid in opening and closing the mouth. Think this is just a coincidence? Look at Chica in other games. Chica in Fnaf 1, a fundamentally different design. Funtime Chica, definitely not. Toy Chica, nope. The only other time we see this sort of fully separated head design for animatronics is with the Fnaf 6 Rockstar animatronics. Ones that, again, we know were built by Henry as part of his plan to lure everyone back to his pizzeria trap. In short, the animatronic design seems to be giving us a timeline of events. The mediocres and Wizards were built by Henry early in the timeline of the games. Eventually, Afton starts to influence the designs more and more until Henry comes back to design the robots that were used for his pizzeria trap. But again, I ask, why does any of this matter? Isn't this just a minor detail? Me looking for connections where they don't really matter? No. Knowing that the Wizards and the mediocres share a design seems like it might help explain another part of the lore, Happiest Day. In Fnaf 3's Happiest Day minigame, we walk past children wearing masks that match the coloring and rough shape of the mediocres. Pink pig, green frog, purple hippo, orange elephant, blue... okay, not all of them match. But here's the thing, I'm not the one pointing that detail out. This is actually coming from Scott Cawthon himself. In the Five Nights at Freddy's Ultimate Guide, the character description for each mediocre melody calls this out as something worth noting. Quote, it's unconfirmed, but a child in the Fnaf 3 Happiest Day minigame appears to be wearing a Happy Frog mask, Orville mask, Mr. Hippo mask. Every single entry mentions this specific detail. Seems like an odd fan theory to call so much attention to. And remember, Happiest Day is an exact recreation of the Fnaf 4 pizzeria. We enter at the stage where Crying Child's bitten, we pass 3 tables, there's a bit of a gap, and then the final birthday table for the cake that's gonna set Crying Child's soul free. It seems to suggest that at some point the mediocre melodies existed in one version of the restaurant right alongside Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica. But how could all that be? Well, it's easier than you might think. In the story The Puppet Carver, we read about the Pizza Playground, a restaurant that seems to predate or be a competitor to Freddy's. And in it, we see that the franchise uses very rudimentary animatronics that break down a lot. There's a pig with a banjo, an off-brand bear named Baron Von Bear, and an unknown bird animatronic. It's the mediocre melodies, guys. Pig Patch, Ned Bear, and hold on, there's no bird in the mediocre melodies. Unless, of course, we're talking about Chica. What this story seems to heavily suggest is that Chica started at a different pizza franchise and eventually crossed over into Freddy's, becoming popular enough to eventually join the Core 4. Also working at that pizza playground is a talented creator named Porter, someone who seems to have the ability to make wood-based animatronics come to life. In short, it's the book's stand-in for Henry. Henry may not be the most technologically advanced creator out there, but whatever he creates contains this certain X factor about it, a spark of life. It's how he's able to create endoskeletons out of nothing but wood. No power, no nothing, just wood and a childlike imagination. This, I think, starts to give us an important piece in the puzzle. Afton was the business guy, a tech bro who was smart and could build machines able to mimic voices and transform and launch giant claws out of their stomachs for no apparent reason. But it was Henry who had the pure love of his craft, that intangible thing that just couldn't be replicated, and it drove Afton crazy. In the Silver Eyes novel, we read a bit about Afton's old journals, that they were, quote, full of raving paranoia, passages about Henry that ranged from wild jealousy to near worship, which now gets us moving towards a motive. You see, one thing that I kept getting stuck on in the building of a timeline was the question of why. Why does Afton kill? And out of everyone, why does he kill Henry's daughter, Charlie, specifically? She is one of, if not the first victim of the entire series. So why does Afton do it? Just because he's evil? Just because he's drunk from the bar at Junior's? No. I think Afton both loved and hated his business partner. He admired him and his magic, but also despised him for his success. This contradiction starts to point us to Afton Afton's motive for murder. It also finally helps give us a framework for the early parts of their story. Loyal theorists, let me now point us to the most obvious place that we should have been looking for lore this entire time: the history of the Chuck E. Cheese franchise. Because in a game all about animatronic pizza restaurants, why would we not look to see what creative inspiration Scott might have gotten from the real-life franchise that started it all? I am so dumb. It took me researching an episode over on food theory to finally realize that I should have at least considered this at some point during the last 7 years of solving FNAF. Major head test moment. Anyway, I did exactly that, and what I learned was enlightening, to say the least. You see, what we now know of as Chuck E. Cheese actually started as the product of a feud between two rival animatronic pizza restaurants, Pizza Time Theater and Showbiz Pizza Place. Pizza Time was founded by a smart businessman who wanted to recreate Disneyland's Country Bear Jamboree. In the end, their onstage show wound up soulless and had no solid theme. Showbiz Pizza, meanwhile, had a creator who built better robotic attractions that were full of life. They also had a solid theme where everyone had southern accents and a lot of charm. I mean, just watch the clips and the difference is immediately clear.
Like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, you get it?
See, we're all up here on the stage, and we can all turn, go around a big circle together. See, like this, our feet aren't screwed to the floor or bolted down. We can move. We got more moves than a can of worms. And then that old 1-2 Billy Bob can come up there and stick his old ugly mug in your face.
To me, the battle between these two real-life pizza places, these two men, sounds a lot like the battle between William and Henry, a smart businessman who wanted to riff off Disney's Bear Show versus a talented artist that was building animatronics with actual life and good southern accents.
I was just waiting for you to drop your guard.
Even small details of the real-life story map nicely onto the games, like the fact that these pizza places had small cabaret stages off to the side for extra acts to get added later. Just like how Foxy stands alone in Pirate Cove. A separate act that we see was the last one added to the core group of 4. In real life, Pizza Time Theater, the one I most associate with William Afton, went heavily into debt and was forced to merge with Showbiz Pizza. That meant that, at least for a while, all the animatronics existed under one roof. But because the characters from Pizza Time were stronger for branding, specifically Chuck E. Cheese, that's the ones that they ultimately moved forward with. I suspect that something similar happened in the games. William's bear-themed restaurant went heavily in debt. He gets saved by his rival Henry, and the two merge their restaurants together to create Fazbear Entertainment. Chica, a mediocre melody, officially joins Fredbear's cast of friends, and the rest are slowly phased out to obscurity. And William, angry and bitter, never truly lives down the humiliation of his failure, prompting him to lash out in a drunken rage against Charlie one night behind the pizzeria. This feels right to me, to set up William as more than just an evil purple guy. This flow of events actually gives him a reason to want to kill, a motive. It also aligns with a lot of the interviews that Steel Wool Studios has been doing recently. J-Top, creative director at Steel Wool, recently acknowledged how important it is for your horror villain to be an actual, fully fleshed out, tragic character.
Try not to set out to make a cool looking villain, you know? Go make a monster that have a reason for it. Look at like anthology horror. Here's somebody doing something really, really bad. Like they murdered someone. Something happens, often ironically, that then comes back to bite them. A creature is created, a situation is created, and then they're judged and they get their just desserts. Every big, horror icon essentially fits that structure in a way. Why is Freddy Krueger popular? Well, it's a revenge story, isn't it? Miss Voorhees, it's a revenge story. These aren't just like these supernatural forces that came out of nowhere to just hurt people and punish people. There were results of other wrongdoing.
William Afton, if I'm right, follows this exact pattern. His jealousy over Henry's skill causes him to lash out, which in turn dominoes to him building the very robots that'll eventually take Elizabeth and his crying child's son away from him. The other thing that this mediocre melody timing issue may help explain is Cassidy's death. In the Fazbear Frights books, there's Andrew, who's basically the book stand-in for Cassidy. I know we're always supposed to take things in the books with a grain of salt, but Andrew here is an angry spirit that keeps William's soul tethered to a hellish purgatory so it can be punished again and again and again. He's also known to have had his body stuffed inside of Golden Freddy, so really the connections between the two aren't subtle. But Andrew has two unusual details about him. First, he wears an alligator mask. Second, and even more strangely, it's repeatedly made clear that his soul is attached not to an animatronic or an endoskeleton or anything like that, but to a battery pack, of all things. Now that is unusual. He's stuffed into Golden Freddy, but his soul is in a battery pack. Where in this franchise do we see animatronics using battery packs, let alone off-branded animals using battery packs? Oh wait, it's the Mediocre Melodies. Could they possibly have been around during the missing children's incident? Yes. Given what we already talked about with the Generation 1 Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica matching the designs of the Mediocre Melodies, it's certainly possible. We also see that the Golden Freddy suit has the same Henry style of design.
Yo,
In both the Fazbear
JJT Jish, how you doing, bro? Appreciate you stopping by. How you doing, bro? I'm just, as you can see, the timer's at over 10 hours. And I've been listening or watching Game Theory for over 10, well over 10 hours. You can see the extra times on the top two. There's that for you. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. I'm just trying to survive for now, bro. I have 4 videos left. 4 videos left. I honestly thought it was gonna be much longer. I thought this was gonna take much longer than I thought it did. Yeah. I thought it was gonna be like about 4 days for me to finish this. I'm getting it done today. Within, you know, I think under 24 hours. Yeah, under 24 hours. Let me say that. Bro, no worries, dude. But yeah, that's basically how I'm just chilling right now. Yeah. This is just how I've been for like the past 10 hours.
And the science behind this thing is fascinating. Confession time, I do not drink enough water, mostly because
Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it though.
Like
Hope you have a good day.
Whatever you're doing. Why I'm addicted to soda
and yeah.
and Coke. But Air Up has actually
That's basically
invented
it
an
for now.
incredible way to help people like me kick their soda habit.
I'm just trying to survive.
Good, without aspartame, without artificial sweeteners, without sugary syrups. What do they use instead? Nothing. They use science. They use these scent pods that fit directly onto the top of the bottle.
How you doing?
How does that possibly change the flavor of your water?
What is Map Pack going on about? What the frick?
That is what Air Up is taking advantage of. These pods are full of flavorful smells like apple, peach, wild berry, which is my personal favorite.
We're on to the next video now. What's the frick? Whenever I'm doing the Fnaf stuff.
Today we end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8.
And he said that 10 times already. Ending the torment.
FNAF timeline
Very cool.
Is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss back together. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that feels like a kid revealing the class project that he's been working on all year. Except here, it's the class project that I've been working on for the past decade of my life. This one is
true,
my friends, and I gotta admit,
I didn't realize how far back
video on this franchise
this series goes.
Back in the days when Mike was the crying child, Afton coming back was actually a surprise, and Fazgoo wasn't a phrase I'd ever thought I'd have to utter. But since the last time I did something like this, we've had 3 more massive games, the death and revival of the FNAF movie, and more robot kids than you can shake a staff bot at. It is exhausting trying to keep track of this whole franchise, which honestly is why I'm here today.
How long did it take you to have 1/4?
Complicated. It is
1/4.
full of speculation and theory. So to hopefully make it a little easier for
1/4? What are you talking
everyone
about?
to give us all a baseline to talk about this franchise
Take
moving
to have
forward into the
1/4.
future, it's time to reveal my current working FNAF timeline.
How long did it take to have
But just before I do, I
1/4?
just
What
wanna explain a couple of
what does
things.
that
First,
mean?
This timeline is massive. Seriously, it is huge. This thing towers over any video
So how
project
long
we
does it
have
take to have his
ever
4th
done
channel?
on the channel. But when you look at the totality of this franchise, the story of
It
FNAF
released this
really
year.
boils down to the story of one man,
So
William Afton. His successes, his failures, his rise to becoming co-owner of one of the most successful
8
restaurant
years probably
franchises in the
since
world, his
since at least the
eventual
first
fall to the
FNAF video.
monsters he helped to
I know that
create,
for sure.
only to then be reborn
But yeah,
in a new digital
I mean,
form later. That's why I've decided to split this
it's been
timeline
relatively
into
that
3 main chunks.
that
The
long,
foundation
right?
of Freddy,
It's
how the business started, and
probably
how
even
it
longer. You probably
came to
started
be
the channel
the
before,
Afton
yeah.
era, William's decades-long
I don't
murder
enjoy the
story,
4th
and
channel at
cursed
all.
purple
I'm gonna
guy.
give it a buck
Basically
50. I
my
have not
opinion,
watched.
everything
I've seen like
that
one video
happens
from that channel. I'm
after
like,
the
yeah,
Pizza Simulator fight.
I'm out of it.
Because
You know what I
there
mean?
are lots of new big
I'm
revelations
really.
in this thing that
I
seemingly
feel like
come out of
nobody
nowhere,
really
as well as
expected it at the
just
same
points I
time,
wanna
but it's
talk
like
about further. I decided to dedicate
style
one
theory. Are
episode to
you?
each chunk. I
Are
originally
you
wanted it to
serious,
be
Matt
one
Pat? Like, come on.
seamless, continuous video, but it just felt
Honestly, I
incomplete
would have.
without some sort
Everyone
of
was probably like rooting for a book theory. Like imagine him like reading books and just getting theories about it. Imagine if he just got philosophical with us, you know, just read like Plato's book or whatever, and then it's like boom, book theory. What is the meaning of life? That's just a theory. That would have been so much better than just style theory. Did Doja Cat's outfit to the gala have an effect on the stock market? You know what I mean? Like it's just like that.
Bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will show thumbnails, video titles, books, and any other citations that we need throughout the video. So if you wish to understand that,
I have no idea like what's going on with style theory though. I haven't watched a single video from that. I somewhat keep up with film theory though. I do enjoy film theory. Don't care for food theory. Yeah, and style theory is just out of the question at this point.
I present to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness and along the way discovered the secret to eternal life. Our story begins not in the 1980s, or even in the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah, one of the states hit hardest, fourth highest unemployment in the nation and full of transients. People looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired and they were hungry, but as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits. A simple roadside attraction called Fredbear's Singin' Show. The ads were plastered all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in the popular pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop. It immediately said that this, Fredbear's, was a place where you could bring the family. And the price, honestly, couldn't be beat. For 50 cents, you could get food and entertainment as you watched the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you only got to see dancing bears at large traveling circuses like Barnum and Bailey, where the tickets would go for about $1. That's $1 without food. But this was a smaller show, like the type from the Von Brothers or the Robbins Brothers.
Style furry isn't that good. It's fine. I don't know. I haven't seen too much of style theory, honestly. Like I said, like one video probably, and then that was basically it. Not much about it that I really care for. I just haven't watched much of it, honestly.
That was his nickname at least, but his parents like to call him William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William
Did I watch this video before? I mean, I probably have, most likely.
But how?
I just don't remember watching this one. It's a newer video, actually.
How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary costumes. William was inspired by the work of Walt Disney, who throughout the 50s and 60s was pioneering the use of mascot suits throughout his theme park. The big innovation? Suits with 5 fingers. This allowed the performers wearing the suits to use their natural arms and hands to interact with the guests, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally, with a simple mascot suit, he would be able to realize his childhood dream. He would be able to bring Fredbear to life. To appeal to the kids, and for copyright reasons, he changed Fredbear from a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But feeling like one character wasn't enough, he added another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because that was his. It was an original character that he had created from scratch. And I do mean scratch. William's hand-sewn costumes were rough, with seams and stitches visibly showing, but it was the best that he could do. And you know what? It was just enough. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small but enthusiastic crowds. Finally, he was able to deliver fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted and inspired so many years ago. And things could have ended there. That could have been the end to his story. It could have been perfect had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea and they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal characters. His idea, except they did it better. William may have been the first, but obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it, but this restaurant was able to do the thing that he always wanted to do: make the animals actually come to life. All of the performers in this restaurant were robots, simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs, but all of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own, no human required. It was like magic that came from the mind of a creator named Henry Emily.
Probably like he hired someone, I guess.
In some small way, had been able to harness the power of life itself. Afton admired him. He was jealous, to be sure, but he also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's party world was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, a hippo known to ramble on and on. That one was more of a joke for the parents, but it was the main stage that was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken thing with a southern drawl named Chica, backed by a band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a banjo, an upbeat frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent. Wait, a bear? But bears were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse? Something to fit the country theme a bit better. Why'd it have to be a bear? And adding insult to injury, they had the nerve to call this thing Ned Bear, a direct copy of his own Fredbear.
Whoops, that's gonna leave a mark.
No, that was not okay. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness. A bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's party world over Fredbear's. William just couldn't compete with the appeal of the robots. Eventually, his restaurant would go bankrupt, only to get bailed out by, of course, Henry Emily. Another insult, another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget. 1979. Despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was a period of massive success and expansion. With the two franchises now merged into one, it was the best of both worlds. Afton's ideas with Henry's robotic expertise. The two men decided to launch under a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans in performing suits as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as a brand and because he was the original performing animal mascot. Afton appreciated that. This new restaurant would also see a mix of characters as the two franchises merged into one, with Pig Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. And as part of this one big Fredbear family, they even got themselves official merch that were released, ranging from masks to magnets.
The crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet?
That said, not all the characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre, so they faded away into the dumpster, storage units, and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if and when a headliner went out of commission. Others, though, would fare much better, like a new Pirate Fox, as well as a blue guitar-playing variant of the yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big, it would spawn its own cartoon show, Fredbear and Friends. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong that they would be able to support the Fredbear's Family Diner franchise all on their own, while also spinning off a new sister location dedicated to their friends. In 1983, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters: Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good, and Afton was happy, mostly. It did bother him that the one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in that cartoon show. The only character in the roster of regulars to get ignored for the show, but other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, 2 sons, a daughter, he had a thriving business, and best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from the man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do. Because it was quick and easy, new characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of his signature animatronics for that character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinged or sliding jaw design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with the kids? What if his mascot suits could become animatronics? What if you could use more than just rigid metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that would give the animatronics fluidity and flexibility while still providing structure? The possibilities for this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability to control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning his way to an engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit it out loud, one other thing that kept pushing him forward was the desire to beat his former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable, to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 1 of the story. That said, at the end of each of these chunks, chunks, I want to break down some of the logical leaps that I made, since the more narrative format doesn't give me much of a chance to justify a lot of the big decisions. And admittedly, there are some large leaps in here. Let's just start off with Fredbear's Sing and Show, shall we? We know, based on the retro poster that was hidden in Security Breach, that at least at one point, Fredbear was an actual bear. And like I called out in that narrative segment, dancing bear shows were a real form of entertainment. The only problem is that, timing-wise, none of our main characters would be the people in charge of that business in the 30s and a series of pizza restaurants in the 80s without them just being extremely old. Best case scenario, if Afton's running the Sing and Show when he's 18, that still puts him at nearly 70 when the first pizzeria opens and his murder spree begins. That just doesn't make a lot of logical sense because he doesn't become immortal until his first death in Springtrap. That's why I suspect that Fredbear's Sing and Show was either a family business that Afton then carried on to a new generation, or something that he saw as a kid and just wanted to recreate when he grew up. The Fredbear Sing and Show thing also starts laying the groundwork for some of the core elements of this story, that Freddy's was a place of fantasy and fun, and that Afton, despite eventually falling to become the heartless serial killer and mad scientist that we know him as, began as someone with good intentions and a love of entertaining kids. He wanted to bring things to life from the very beginning, a theme that recurs a lot for him throughout the rest of the franchise. Next up, let's talk about those mascot costumes. One thing that I keep going back to is the design of Glitch Trap. It's a handcrafted suit. You can see the seams and everything. It even has 5 fingers for the performer's hands. It is very much not a Springtrap suit. This is something much more rudimentary. It came at a time before animatronics were a part of the story. That's why I suspect that it was actually the first, predating literally everything. It's also a suit that is very personal to Afton. He put his digital consciousness in that form. It's his personal avatar. It's the way that he sees himself. There's also a whole separate discussion to be had here about the habits and rituals of serial killers. So the fact that he's choosing to lure kids and kill them in this particular suit actually says a lot about his emotional attachment to it. So while Fredbear seems to have started as someone else's creation, Golden Bonnie was uniquely Williams, giving him a personal connection. And that's not all. In this whole franchise, only one set of characters have themselves 5 fingers, the Nightmares. Even Golden Freddy, Fredbear was a 5-fingered wearable suit at one point in the story, as we see in this shot from the graphic novel, before he, like everyone else, was turned into an animatronic. This seems to imply that all of the main characters had similar wearable mascot outfits at least at one point in time, and that whoever is having the FNAF 4 nightmares, if they even are nightmares, something that we'll touch on in part 2, saw those mascot suits specifically. Lastly, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The literal elephant, Orville Elephant, as well as the rest of the mediocre melodies. For a while now, I've suspected that the mediocre melodies played a much more important role in the story than just being a bunch more animatronics to fill out the roster. Especially Nedbear, which is just so suspiciously close to Fredbear. And yet, there are 2 key details that we're gonna have to justify with any mediocre melodies mention. One, they're very rudimentary with external battery packs, implying that they come very early in the timeline. And 2, we know that, at minimum, Mr. Hippo does eventually become an official member of the extended Freddyverse. But if these things are supposed to be cheap, generic rip-offs, why would you be trying to rip off yourself? You wouldn't. You would be stealing someone else's ideas. So if Afton created Fredbear, there would have to be some rival franchise. The only other person who would likely be ripping him off? Henry. We've talked extensively about how the mediocre melodies are clearly Henry's design aesthetic, so it just has to be him. I don't think Henry's doing this maliciously. He doesn't strike me as the type. He was likely building the robots at the orders of someone else that was running a rival restaurant franchise. But that's enough motivation to start Afton down a path of jealous rivalry, but also begrudging admiration. As the Freddy Files Ultimate Edition says, it's important to revisit the beginning of Henry and William's relationship, so here you go. I think this is where it begins. Also, this is future Matt Pat here coming back to add this one in. Seems like the recently released character encyclopedia has backed up all of this speculation. I've had this timeline written for about a month now, but I've also been holding off a bit to see what wrenches this character encyclopedia might throw into it. And on this particular point, I gotta say, it seems like we might actually have nailed it. They actively call out the suspicious similarities to the main Fredbear crew. Quote from one of the pages: Nedbear looks like an imitation, altered just enough to avoid copyright issues. I don't know about you, but that seems to imply that we were right on the money. Knowing all of this, at one point the franchises had to have merged. That's really the only way that you get Mr. Hippo from the rival franchise as part of the Fazbear crew. This also mirrors a lot of what happened in the real-life history of Chuck E. Cheese, with 2 rival restaurants, each with their own casts of characters, merging to become one unified brand. Again, we've gone into that in detail with other videos, just wanted to remind you all of that here. But why would I call out the rival restaurant as being named Chica's Party World? Few things, actually. First, we know for a fact that a location location named Chica's Party World exists. It is mentioned in the source code teasing sister location, so it is out there somewhere and doesn't fit cleanly anywhere. Second, in the story The Puppet Carver, Chica is very explicitly looped in with the book versions of Pig Patch and Ned Bear, implying that she started as a mediocre melody. Thirdly, her design just fits better with a theme of down-home country animals with southern accents playing the banjo and eating with bibs. And with her being the headliner of the show with her name on the restaurant, it would make sense then that when the restaurants merged, she was the one that was added to the main cast of characters while all the other mediocres faded away. It's also why when Freddy's closes after William's killing spree, she's the one to branch back off into her old franchise and is therefore missing in sister location, a detail that's bothered me for years at this point. It might also explain why William decided to stuff his first dead kid into Chica. That one was Henry's creation, not his. Is all of this a big leap? Yeah. Is it connecting a lot of dots that are very spread out across the franchise that I've been holding on in the back of my mind for years? Absolutely. But I think it makes sense. It also serves as a clean answer to a lot of the random threads that Scott's been leaving dangling for years. So with all of that in mind, my friends, we can close the book on the foundation of Freddy's. And don't worry, next week I'll be back to give you arguably one of the most confusing parts of this entire timeline situation, Part 2, the Afton era. I promise it will actually be next week this time. No more waiting around. I am just as eager to get this one out the door as you are to watch it. I promise.
I know,
you know
dude.
what else I promise?
I know,
promise
dude.
that we'll actually get to talking about the games. I would have liked to have talked about them in this episode.
10 hours
but there
on
just
there?
isn't that much in the games that helps
But
us
it's
to
11
pick the
hours
ending
total
to
that I've been
Family
live.
Diner. Although, let's be honest, this franchise has never
So
been
I
just
started like
about
20 minutes
games
after.
anyway. Even back in the early
Like,
days of FNAF,
I started for
we were
like
decoding
20
images
minutes and
source
then,
code
you
that
know.
Scott fed us through the website. The modern day books and the clues that we get from
yeah.
those things, now they're just
I know,
modern
it's good.
extensions of that.
Dude, no,
All of it
there's
is crucial
60
to understanding
hours,
this
bro.
franchise and
I mean,
its
that's 60
lore.
hours.
Unless, of course,
There's
Steel
60
Wolf finally
videos,
gets around to
bro.
making that Fredbear's Family Diner
Almost
game they want to make so badly.
24 hours, right? It's been so far 18 hours. At least 18 hours. At least one more. 19, 20 hours.
Of like Fazbear Entertainment or the origin of
Yeah,
Freddy
I'm-
Fazbear.
But
I've
in the
just been
meantime,
chilling
while we
here, bro.
wait for that inevitably cryptic
This-
game,
but this
hope that
YouTube video is gonna
start
go
to the timeline helps
crazy
fill in
though,
some of
right?
those gaps. I'm excited to share part 2 with you next week. If you haven't subscribed and rang
Yeah,
the
I'm-
bell, make
I'm-
sure
I'm
you do
out
it
of
now
it,
so
bro.
you're
Like,
notified
it's gonna
when
be
that part
past
drops.
midnight
I
once I
cannot
finish
wait to
this,
see
bro.
your thoughts down in the comments below. And as
yeah.
always, I remind you, it's all
27 minutes, almost half an hour. This next video. Nice. Here we go.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, and officially page 7 of the FNAF timeline script. Last time we covered the origins of Freddy's. We talked about William Afton's childhood dream project of making a
Page
singing
7?
bear come to life, and the
Well, he's just
infuriating
been like
moment that his
doing like the
dream is
entire
copied by a
playlist,
rival
huh?
restaurant
I mean, he's
franchise
doing like the
looking to steal
entire
away
like
his success.
timeline.
The
I guess.
merger of the two franchises
That's fine.
results in William meeting Henry, a brilliant designer with a knack for robotics. Working together, they make Fredbear's flourish, spawning popular Saturday morning cartoon shows, toy lines, and spin-off restaurants under the Fazbear name. When last we left him, Afton was thriving, the world of robotics opening his eyes to new and exciting ways of bringing characters to life. Bringing things to life, yeah, that was his core driving force, his passion. And it was this very passion that would mutate, twist, and morph from here on out in the story. Because with life, there is inevitably death. Something that Afton would become intimately familiar with. But before Afton acquaints himself with death, I want you to take some time to acquaint yourself with our
Don't put that
newest
in my chat.
channel.
What are you doing,
Guys,
bro?
this is a huge moment
11 at
for us
night.
theorists.
No,
For the last
10:44 at
decade,
night,
we've
bro.
had this 4-player
Don't be doing
controller
that, my
icon,
guy.
and now we finally
We're all
fill in
dying
the
here.
final missing piece. Get
Bro, give me
ready for the
FNAF.
rollout
Why is
of
he
our
not giving me
newest
FNAF?
theorist channel. Drum roll, please. Style Theory, where we're looking at... It's also the channel where we're gonna physically be testing the viability of female...
Here, go chat.
So go ahead, enjoy your all-day
You know what?
theory
You got me there.
marathon. And now
You
with
got
our
me there,
logo
my guy.
complete, it's time to complete our other massive
you
ongoing
doing,
project,
you know?
this timeline.
How you doing?
Onward to part 2,
Well, we're in
where
my
things are
last
about to get dark
3
in a hurry.
videos of stream. How you doing, bro?
1983, business was booming with 2 whole restaurant franchises running, Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly
That's pretty
opened
funny, bro.
Freddy
You got me there.
Fazbear's Pizza. Together, William and Henry had been able to take the hybrid suit idea and make it into a reality. They called their new invention
Doesn't
the
how about
Spring
you? I am
suit.
doing
And fittingly enough, it was
pretty good.
symbolic of the partnership between these two
I
men.
just-
A human suit as designed
I
by
started
William
at,
that could
like,
become
what,
a freestanding
12
Henry-style
a.m.,
robot. But
11
because it was
a.m.
still new tech with kinks to work
It
out,
is
the
now going to
rollout
be
was
11
limited,
p.m.
restricted only to
I
the
just what I
Fredbear's
do-
Family
I mean,
Diner
do
location. All of this
have a
meant
Discord.
that William
It's
was
just kind of
busier
dead
than
right
ever.
now.
He didn't have time to
I
be a
should have
full-time parent, so he
actually
designed a
like
nanny cam system where cameras and
remade it.
speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood.
I should have
as well
actually
as in his
remade the
youngest son's
Discord.
favorite toy, Psychic Friend
It's waiting
Fredbear.
for me, bro.
I
You're
mean,
probably on the
plushy
West Coast, then.
Fredbear.
I mean, on
But
the East
since
Coast.
cameras just weren't enough
Or
to raise
Texas,
a kid, he
maybe?
also left
You don't
childcare
need to tell me
duties
where
to
you're
his
at.
eldest son,
But,
Michael.
like,
There was just one problem with
I do have
that.
a Discord,
Michael was
but
far from the best babysitter.
it's just kind of dead
He
right now, and I don't have a
tormented his
link.
younger brother by jump
I
scaring
do
him with a
intend to
foxy
try to like
mask and
remake it
constantly
to
left
fix
him
it up for
behind.
like my
William
new
watched all of it
for
from
my,
his
my new
cameras.
content.
Kids would be kids.
Mar-
Tomorrow
Maryland?
was another day after all.
Yeah,
Except
East Coast.
Michael's torment didn't
That's
stop.
wild.
Bitter, angry thoughts would run through
Very cool,
Michael's
though.
mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining
But I mean,
crybaby
if
all
you
the
want to
time?
keep
It
up, well,
just
thank you for the
wasn't
follow, bro. I
fair.
appreciate
It was
Hell
time
yeah.
that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank. A prank that just so
But if you
happened
do want to
be
keep up
on
with
this
me at least,
crying
and then we
child's
can eventually
birthday.
see if I
He and
put
his
on a
friends would
Discord.
take
I'm
his scared
probably gonna do
little
a Discord
brother and make him
eventually.
do the one thing that he was
Soon,
terrified of
honestly.
doing, getting close
I
to
think
the
after I
animatronics.
finish
That would
this,
be
because I haven't gotten any
embarrassing for
like
kid that was
a
such
lot
an
of work.
embarrassment
There's
to
gonna be a
him.
lot
His
of work that I
brother
have to do
squirmed,
after I
screamed,
finish like
kicked,
this
and fought, but
playlist.
just as they were putting that small
One of that
squirming
thing,
boy
one of
up
those
to
things is
Fredbear's
actually
lips,
fix up the
mouth
Discord for like
snapped
new
shut.
new
The
viewers
sensitive
and new
spring locks
members to
inside
come
the
in.
body had been triggered
So
by
yeah,
the
just
boy's
if you want to keep up,
movements.
just check
They'd
out my socials,
immediately
whatever.
clamped down.
I'll put it on
The wriggling stopped.
my.
The boy went limp.
I'll
It was
put
just
it
a
as many
prank.
places as I
It was
can.
meant to be funny.
I'll
The boy was
play on
taken
my
to the
link tree and
hospital and
everything.
was immediately given an
If
IV.
you want to see the
Flowers
Discord,
and pills filled the nightstand next to his
yeah.
hospital bed.
And
The
that's
damage
basically
was
after
too
I Discord.
severe. He couldn't recover. As the younger brother's consciousness
yeah.
began to fade, he could hear Michael's
Basically,
last words. A
Oh,
small,
and then I do
flimsy
appreciate you
apology.
following.
But his father,
It's not bad.
Williams, through the
Okay.
voice of the
Working that. This
Fredbear
was really
plush,
good.
were a firm
Discord
and
channel.
committed
I know.
promise to a
I did
dying
have
son.
it.
You're broken.
It's just difficult
I will
because
put you
it's
back together.
difficult to keep
This
up with the
would not
Discord.
be the end. No matter what, William's
The thing is,
son
when I made my
would live
Discord,
again.
I
It would
just
just take
opened
time.
up a
Time
few
that
like
right now he just didn't
a
have.
few like
His young son's
channels,
heart
and I just
flatlined.
like go
The boy
crazy to my
faded
like
into the
viewers.
icky unknown of the afterlife.
I had like
in the
no
aftermath
bots
of the
in there. I had like
tragedy,
no
changes started happening around the restaurants.
bots
Kids
as
were
in
now
like
required
stuff that
to wear
helps moderate
security
your
wristbands to prevent
your
anyone
like
from getting outside without parental
Discord or like
permission. Any kid
do
who
little
approached the
activities or
exit
whatever.
without permission
And
would
nothing
have
in
to
there. It's
answer
just
to the
like
security
a couple
code.
channels.
A
and then,
marionette
like,
on
boom.
strings that could fly around
what I
on
mean? Like,
rails across
go
the
crazy
restaurant
with
to stop kids in their
I just
tracks.
didn't really
It
have
was
much
Williams'
to do
idea,
on the
inspired by
Discord.
Michael constantly
what I mean?
leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's spring
I,
lock failure, all the
I honestly
suits
will
were getting
probably like
retired,
reopen or
locked away at the
remake the
nearby
Discord.
Freddy
So
Fazbear location.
that is
It was yet
on the agenda
another
for
tough
me at the
pill
very
to swallow
least.
after all
That's
the
my
hard
next
work that
big
he and Henry had put
point
into them.
of reference.
William
Yeah,
would
I get it.
eventually bury
Yeah,
the
yeah.
boy's small body in a remote
That's basically
location
it, though.
out in the woods right alongside his drive into
yeah.
and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling.
just
His
to-
wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she
I've
could do
been
was
listening
sit and
to
watch
Fnaf for, like,
TV.
the
But his
past
son
10 hours.
Michael was
It's-
far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations of a
it's
golden
amazing.
bear
It's great. It's
standing
great. I
outside
love
of his
it. I love
window.
it.
The boy was so racked with guilt
Yeah.
that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his
And
brother
after
stuck inside the
this
suit that
stream
took his
in
life.
particular,
The
or like
suit's
when I'm done
three-toed
watching
feet
all
digging
the
into the wet earth. The
Fnaf
words "It's
game
me"
theories,
ringing through Michael's ears. Some nights,
I
Michael
kind
would
of
even go
want
so
to
far as to
do
break
like
out
that.
of his room
I
to
want
check
to
the
play a few
gravesite and ensure that his
Fnaf
brother
fan
was
games.
still there. As for
Is this
William
swap out on
himself, he
YouTube?
disappeared into his work and his drinks.
Uh,
Junior's, the local bar,
this
wasn't
swap out
far
on
from
YouTube?
his
I mean,
son's
there's
gravesite. He
both
found
links
himself going
there.
there more and more frequently,
Pretty sure,
spending
so.
longer and longer amounts of time.
You can check them out if you
the
want
bar
to.
gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect, and
yeah.
stew on
I
how
have
Henry
both.
had stolen his idea for an animal-themed restaurant.
If you want to
How
check
they
those out
cut
too,
his character out of the
you can
cartoon
check my channel.
when
It's all
everyone
there, I
else
guess.
was there. How Henry had humiliated
yeah.
him by buying him out of
I do post.
bankruptcy.
I do
And
post
now,
once
now
every
there was
day
a son. Henry had
on
taken his son from him. The robotic
YouTube.
part that failed after all. William
it called?
ordered one more
YouTube,
drink, but it was one too many. The bar
Shorts,
turned him out
TikTok,
told him to
and
go home.
Instagram Instagram
William
reels.
didn't go home.
So there's
Drunk
that.
and angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's
I haven't
daughter,
actually posted
Charlie, locked
today's
outside of the building, bullies laughing
TikTok,
at
so
her
I do
through
need to
the
get
window.
doing
Fine,
that.
some other
Should probably
problem
play
to
games.
fix.
They're very
Then
entertaining to watch.
Afton got
Well, yeah, I
wind
do.
of
I mean, I can't currently play games right now.
This was
Just
his
because
chance
my
to get
computer
back at the
struggles to
man
keep
that
up
had
like doing
humiliated him
this.
all those years ago.
You know what I mean?
Henry had
Like,
killed
look.
his business, and now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for
And
William
then
to do
if I try
some
to drag
killing of
around,
his own. Let Henry feel what
I'm
it's
dragging
like to
around
have
the
something
caption
you
thing right
love
now.
get ripped
Wait,
away.
stop.
While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William
that.
attacked Charlie
Okay,
in the
it's
back
usually
alley.
smoother,
It
right?
felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment
It's
and
just-
bitterness trapped in his heart.
I'm
finally
streaming from a
released in
laptop
moment of
right now. That's the
pure,
thing. So I
unapologetic
can't really.
He would make Henry hurt like he hurt
I can't really do much on this computer at the very least. I do play games. I do play games occasionally. How old do you seem? Either 18 or 23. Pick one. That makes sense. But I do play games. So don't. I'm just doing this in particular just to like have a stream going, and I thought it'd be cool and funny to just binge all the FNAF videos on stream. But some of the games I'm currently like I'm gonna play eventually is the Walking Dead Telltale game. I'm on like season 3. No, I'm on season 3. Yes, I'm on season 3, and I have season 3 and 4 to finish. I used to play PvZ Heroes, if you know what that is. Since if you're checking out my VOD, if you're checking out my links, then you can check out my VOD channel on YouTube. You can like scroll down and see like all my old VODs of me playing PvZ Heroes. You do? Yeah. I used to play a lot of PvZ Heroes. I was honestly a good like top. I was like a top 5 PvZ Hero streamers back in the day. Not to brag, but I was top 5. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding, but yeah, that was basically me for a while, and I just kind of like life got in the way, so I couldn't really like stream that much as often. Right now, I have a lot of free time, so I'm streaming. I think after the stream, I'm not gonna be on for a bit. No, I'm gonna stream a good bit. I just have a lot of stuff to do behind the scenes for now, but I will be back on stream eventually, soon at the very least. I'll see what I can do.
He couldn't have another one of his kids wind up
but yeah, when I'm off stream, I'm like always working on something though, like on YouTube video, podcast, TikTok content. You know all the works, right?
And what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality
I do
so
play
easy
some
to
games.
manipulate.
I like the Binding of Isaac.
Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could alter a
I want to play Security Breach, but I'm not sure if I can do that. But I will do that eventually.
Into lumbering, twisted nightmares. Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. So Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions
yeah, I am very excited for the movie. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go watch it when it continues.
Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life suffered even more. He was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone.
Hell yeah. Why has MatPat played this specific sound bit like multiple times? He just loves this one bit. But
despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with
I'm
the
excited
family,
about that. I'm gonna be interested in seeing like the reactions of people who don't know what like FNAF is actually about.
You call that a house? It was
I can't wait to see like how they react. If I don't see like at least one child getting stuffed into an animatronic suit, then it's not a FNAF movie. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's not a FNAF movie. Like, it's not like if I don't see Springtrap locking his joints onto the murderer. It's not a FNAF movie, you know what I mean? Like, it's that simple.
Putting on the golden Bonnie suit, he lured children
I feel like, what if they
one
ended?
to the back
Thanks
room
for
of the pizzeria when no one was
Hell
looking.
yeah.
At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first.
Brian, have I ever showed you the follow things? Hold on, let me stay here, Brian.
He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be
I have animations for like the follows and the stuff like that happens.
No one maintained those things anyway except for him. And so Susie would go into Chica. Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel.
Brian, I still have not posted a TikTok today. What should I post?
And with each little life he snuffed out, his lies got bigger. Their house was burning.
And
They're just being
Becca,
kidnapped
just so you know,
until the last one where all pretense was off. He let himself get
Brian
violent,
is Delilah. That's
This
his real name. I just doxed him for you. There you go.
Over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
The body of Cassidy was far more bloody and broken than any of the others. He'd let himself go too far. That one he shouldn't have killed. With no more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The long-forgotten yellow Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken.
I'll put it in the
his son was
Discord chat.
Newspapers
I'll put it in the chat.
reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing
you can
the
follow
missing
and you can
children's
keep up with me, I
incident.
guess.
Police would even charge William with the crimes after finding security
put
footage
the
of the
chat right
golden
now.
mascot suit luring kids to the back, but they couldn't convict him. They had no bodies, and his face had been hidden behind the mascot suit the entire time. What they had was circumstantial at best, and so he walked away a free man. But Henry knew the truth. In these murders, he saw his daughter Charlie all over again. So he threw Afton out of the company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the kids? Finally, he developed a solution. He would implement an even more extreme security system in the form of new animatronics. Toy animatronics, inspired by the toys that they had been selling years ago. But these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities.
But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of
I
criminal
made them
database
myself.
so they can detect a predator a mile away.
All the original animatronics, now withered with age, were moved to the new location.
We can't see them, it's all
With the
dark.
plan in place, it was time to
Wait till
the year was
Matt.
1987, and the new and improved Freddy
Okay.
Fazbear's Pizza was making
There's
headlines in
follow.
local newspapers. Headlines that
Test
just so happened to
subscription.
catch the
It's the
attention of
Wojak.
William Afton. Freddy's was back
Then
without
there's-
him. That was his idea.
It's
His
another
character.
Wojak.
Henry was yet again trying to
Test
cut
donation.
him out of the picture. No,
can't see
as
it.
long
Frick's
as these
sake.
restaurants stayed open,
Map pad, make it
William
white.
would always come back. Then he noticed the phone number
Alright,
to
there you go.
apply at the bottom of the article. $100 a week to apply call.
Test donation.
Afton would go back, not as an
You
owner
can't
or
see it.
co-founder.
So
He
quick,
would
I can
go
see it
back
now.
in the
Look at
one
that.
place that they would least suspect
Test
him,
bits.
a lowly day shift security guard. And there it was,
Test
buried in the
rates.
back of parts and services mixed
Look
in
at
with
that.
the old
I made that.
animatronics
It's
was
cool,
golden
huh?
rabbits. With the yellow
I do
security
enjoy
badge
that.
still on
Very
his
nice.
chest, he used his crank to pull open the spring locks. It was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back,
Nice.
a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are
Neato.
acting right.
I think I have one more maybe? I don't. No, that's my last one. It's the Wojak, it's the sub, it's the money, and the TV screen. I like animation. I made them a long time ago, I just never used them. I didn't know how to put them into the stream.
He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing how
I also have media
devastating
share
this
as
would
well.
be to Henry the next
I
morning.
figured that
He
out,
tried to
and now
hide
I
his
can.
crime this
I just have
time,
media
just
share
more
open.
blood on Henry's hands.
Yeah,
He failed
and
to protect
text
the
to speech.
kids again. The
Very
restaurant
nice.
had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get it to close. Good, if he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new
Yeah.
pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something strange. The old withered animatronics, they had been wandering around the building, spurred on by
Why do
the
I seem to
puppet.
say
It was
BRB though?
almost like those
Oh,
old
just in case I
robots were
leave the
trying to
camera,
save the
and I,
kids. Save
because
them?
I'm
They
if I
couldn't,
ever leave the
obviously,
camera,
but
then I'm
still,
gonna
how were they
forget to
moving?
like
It
turn
was
that
almost like they
BRB
had
back
been
on.
given life
So I'm just
somehow.
gonna leave it
Did
on,
they have something
right?
to
And
do
then and I
with
look
it?
at my
The
camera, I'm
following
like, oh
day,
yeah,
the news
this is
would report a security
BRB.
guard
I can
getting
just
bitten
go,
by one of
and
the
people are like, okay,
animatronics
cool.
during the day shift.
He's
Was that
he's
bite
BRB.
meant for him? William's
And I
curiosity
just make it
was
bigger.
stronger now than his bloodlust. He had to learn more, but how? There was no way he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's Pizzeria. Heck, there was practically no way a Freddy's would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed to create his own pizzeria.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely
Sorry if you
capturing
hear
his
my
victims and
chair like
preserving them
rocking
for
back
his
and
work.
forth.
With that goal in mind, he designed a new breed of animatronic. Their endoskeletons fluid and flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They could incapacitate and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations. Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2 special ones. The first, Ballora,
You only have
was
2
an
videos to go. I
homage
know,
to the
dude.
woman who left him. Now she would never
2
leave
after
him
this.
again. The second, the titular
Very
baby, was
nice.
designed with his baby in mind. Elizabeth, his youngest
just here
child.
listening.
She would always be Daddy's little girl. The one
Because
that
I saw
listened to
like
him,
he
the
posted a
one
new
that
FNAF
obeyed
video like 2
until
days
the
ago.
day that
I was
she
like, I want to
didn't.
watch it. Then I just had the idea to like just stream myself. Something put it in me, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stream myself.
The day before Circus Baby's Pizza
watching
World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left
all
alone with
the
Baby,
FNAF
she got
videos.
too close. The
So
animatronic
yeah, I'm here
ripped in
now.
half and swallowed
Very
her
cool.
whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal
There's 60
darkness. By the time
videos, bro.
Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His mourning turned to excitement. He had to return to where it all started. 1993. Pathetic. This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly tried to reopen one final time with those old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stank of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls.
Like,
One
yo,
night, then
how you doing, bro? Appreciate you
then
stopping by.
another. William repeatedly
Glad you're
snuck
back.
into the old broken restaurant to lure the living
yeah.
animatronics to him, one by one
I'm just chilling.
them, robbing them.
More
of their
videos left, you know what I mean?
The metal had to be the secret. It had to contain the remnants of life itself. But he had to know for sure. Leaping out
You
of a
get
room
paid
that was
when I watch
invisible to the
ads?
animatronics programming, he dragged the
I feel like I should.
back to his underground
Is it
workshop,
playing ads for you
back to where
guys?
Circus Baby
Wait, is it
watched
is it actually playing
curious
ads for you guys? I
eyes
thought it
that
disabled
somehow
them.
Felt alive. Not knowing what else to do, William melted the
So,
robotic parts down. 5 animatronic
if they are,
endoskeletons reduced
that's
down to
annoying.
one silvery puddle of goo. Could he transfer this living metal?
You are
to his
getting
own
ads so far. I have not got
He
ads.
picked up
Okay,
a syringe and filled it
that
with
is
the molten
cringe.
metal
I'm
and
sorry if it
injected the
does.
goo
Like
into
I don't
Freddy's
know how to
twisted,
stop it.
wiry
Like I
endoskeleton.
have the
And
option off.
suddenly the coils came to life.
Let me
Like
reopen it.
snakes
Hold on,
writhing
let
in
me
a pile of what had once been cold, lifeless metal.
let me check my
moved and
stats then.
jolted on its own.
If
He'd
I'm gonna
done it.
get
He'd unlocked the
if I'm not gonna get
secret
paid
to
for
life
ads, then you
itself.
know.
Except something was clearly
There's a
wrong.
problem
The
here. Let
movements
me
were
open a
erratic.
new
They were
tab so I can
violent,
check it.
angry. Baby didn't act this way.
quick.
She had been calm, collected.
Oh,
This
okay, I
was
was just curious.
clearly
Oh, yeah, I mean,
something else, something
fair enough. But I mean,
mindless,
I'm
frantic.
curious
Perhaps
because
by
I'm like,
mixing the souls
if my
and then
viewers are gonna
pushing
get
them
ads,
out,
like
he had
I should
created
at least get
an
paid for them. If I can't
He
disable
would
my
need to
ads.
keep testing to truly understand it. He needed more of this
Today's
remnant. As he
27th?
searched
No,
the old
29th.
pizzeria one more time for any remaining scraps of metal, the ghosts attacked.
What'd I get?
His past victims come to collect their due, all led by Cassidy.
What
The
did I
5
stream
lined up and blocked
March
the door,
27th?
and Afton's mind reeled.
Oh, it
The
was.
scientific
Yeah, I did. Okay.
implications of this were incredible. Ghosts, real ghosts
guys are
that
ad-
he could see all standing
You
against
wish-
him. But what could
you
they
wish
do?
10 cents
What
per
could
ad?
they do? He
Who told you
panicked
that?
as Cassidy approached. How do you
Bro,
stop
frick.
something that's already dead? Maybe
Um,
with the thing that resulted in their death in the
I
first place.
guess.
He would get into his suit like old
I
times.
got
He
4
would
cents
regain his
on
power over them
March
just like the day that they
27th.
died. He was the genius. He was the
I
one
might
in the
get
suit.
stuff
He was
today.
the one in
I'm not
charge.
sure.
The spring lock
I won't
snapped
know
into place.
until,
Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned
after I end the
restaurant.
stream.
Maybe it was just fate coming to collect its due. He didn't know. The only thing
I've
he did
streamed
know was
24
that his brain was
hours.
suddenly filled with searing white-hot
Almost
pain
24
as
hours in
hundreds
total.
of metallic pins and gears stabbed
I
into
got
his
1
body
cent
from
on
all
March
sides. All he could do was
15th.
collapse, blood slowly oozing
I
out
got
of the
2
suit and
cents on
pooling
the
onto
6th.
floor around him. It couldn't end like
Yeah,
this.
4
It
cents on the
wouldn't
27th.
end like this. His work was
In total,
unfinished.
I have
Unable to
earned,
move, his only option was to survive, to live,
over the,
keep
my entire time
living.
span
It took
of being
days
alive
lying in
on
his
this
own blood, but
website.
eventually someone found him. A security guard making a normal report.
Update.
When he saw the animatronics
Or-
torn apart in the middle of the party room floor, it caused him to file an immediate report of a
Update.
break-in. An owner would have
I
to
have
come
earned
in
how
and
much
claim the
money?
damage. And who else would it be other than Henry? Hope jumped
How
in
much you guys wanna
Afton's
bet?
heart. Henry
Place
would
your
see
bets
him.
now.
They were partners after all. He would be the one to help save him, to get him out of
Drum
the
roll,
suit, to relieve him
please.
from this tremendous pain. Henry
Should
entered the
I
secret
add
room. His eyes fell on Afton sitting there
gifted
in the pool of red,
subs?
and Henry saying
Because
nothing,
I paid for
turned
my own
and
gifted
walked away.
subs,
This is just to inform all employees
which
that due to budget restrictions, the previously
was like a
mentioned
bet that I
safe
made
rooms
one
will
time.
be sealed at most locations, including this one. Nothing is
So,
being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything
excluding
inside,
gifted
it's your own fault.
subs,
Management also requests that this room not
which
be rented
is
to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
And so there Afton would sit, hanging on for 30 years, trapped behind the walls with an iron will
I have
that
earned
refused to
$15
End of this
and
part. I say this part because it's not officially the end of the
34
Afton era just yet, but
cents.
this just felt like a really solid stopping point, and the episode has gone on forever. Okay,
Yes.
so most of this is
In my
things that we
total
already
amount
knew,
of
stuff
time
that's been
streaming.
established and reestablished time and time
5
again
nights
by the
at
games.
Freddy's.
That said, there are 2 things that I absolutely
That's how much they get paid
have
in
to
Fnaf
address.
World, bro.
The
I'm
first
telling you,
and
dude.
biggest is the placement of sister location, or more specifically, Elizabeth's death. To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983. The biggest clue to this is that the crying child saw something. Remember what you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton speaking speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room, one presumably left behind by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close, because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the Character Encyclopedia outright suggest that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows circus babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNAF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit, except for the most important thing, the murder weapon. Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has no motive. It just doesn't make sense prior to 1983. At this point in the story, he hasn't killed anyone, and we know for a fact that the missing children's incident is 1985. So Elizabeth's death coming before any of those events just doesn't work, hence why I placed it where I did in the narrative timeline. Afton's death here is also a bit tricky. We know that he returned to the FNAF 1 location to break down the original animatronics in order to harvest their remnant. We know that he melts down 5 things to become one thing. Candy Cadet makes that very clear. So the 5 things are the 5 endoskeletons from the various animatronics. That would be totally fine if it weren't for one huge problem. On his 5th visit to the pizzeria, Afton gets spring-locked. So either the 5 becoming 1 starts in 1993, but then finishes 30 years later when he re-emerges from the wall to add the last endoskeleton to his pile, or he's had himself some reason to return to the original location after harvesting all the stuff that he can. It's not ideal, but it's the one angle that makes the most sense. And with that, this next chapter comes to a close, thereby leaving us with 5 more games to cover and another 40 plus years of Fazbear history to recap. Ooh, when you put it that way, something tells me that this might balloon into 4 parts. Ugh, we'll see. Anyway, until then, my Faz heads, congratulations, you made it through a massive upload. And hey, if you are still looking for more to watch, then check out the other 5 brand new awesome theories over on our new sister location, Style Theory. This thing literally launched today, so this is your chance to be one of the first people to ever subscribe to this brand new theory channel. Get yourself the bragging rights of being there on day 1 and subscribing.
Thank you. Pat.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory and page 20 of our final FNAF timeline. This is getting ridiculous. Last time we covered William Afton's rise as a serial killer, how the loss of his young son in 1983 caused him to make
two more
promise that would
videos,
ultimately serve as his driving force for decades.
yeah.
I will put you back together. Fueled by grief and obsession, Afton would lose himself in work and drinks. One night in a fit of rage, he lashes out against Henry's young daughter Charlie, his first murder. This moment becomes the first domino to fall in a long sequence of events that ultimately destroys William's life and the lives of those around him. That one murder gives Afton a taste for blood, resulting in the deaths of 10 more children across 2 different pizzerias. Those children go on to possess animatronics, giving Afton his first exposure to Remnant and the potential solution for bringing his son
60.
back to life.
60 in total. Currently on 59.
To produce the Funtime animatronics, as well as their capture.
One more video after this one, bro.
To him for experimentation
One more video.
Of more remnant. Except there was one thing that he didn't account for: his daughter's curiosity. He made the robots too appealing, and it would cost him Elizabeth's life. Now with 2 children to put back together,
that is a lot.
Keep
in mind, these are almost 20-minute videos each.
Their walls. What he didn't account for, though,
these things are way too long, bro. I'm telling you.
Of his past. When last we left him, William was spring-locked, bleeding to
Let me I'm gonna share this Twitch stream
but certainly not
on Twitter.
We're about to see
I want to be able to
Today we're finishing up chapter
get some
2
people
of
to
our
watch
story,
it
wrapping up
as
the
I finish
Afton era. Over the next 6 pages, we switch our focus to the
Can I share
other main
this? I can.
character of the franchise, Mike, a young boy dealing with the fallout of a stupid childhood decision with tragic consequences.
copy a
A young
link?
man whose life is best described as collateral
Twitter?
damage, caught in the blast
Is there Twitter
radius
share?
of
I
Williams'
can't.
whirlwind of destruction. Now, before we begin, let me just rip off the band-aid now. We won't be finishing the timeline today. I know.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wanted to, but covering FNAF VR, AR, and Security Breach wound up taking me an additional 9 pages of script. And I've already made you wait long enough for this part,
Adrian?
so I just had to make the executive call to break this one up into 2. Don't worry, that part is already written, it is already recorded, it is just in the process of being edited. It is a hefty episode. So mark it on your calendar, that one's actually going to be going live on March 25th. It's also coming complete with a live talk back where we go back over everything from the past couple
59 out of
episodes, as well as
60.
having ourselves some very special guests. So overall, that one should be a lot of fun. Fair warning though,
Sounds
the
like a lot of
conclusions
time
we've
left, I
reached
know.
That solve security breach, whew, they
Right
are
now it's about
controversial. I feel good about them. Like, I think that
good
we've
another
locked
hour
in on a lot of the answers
left.
here, but they're gonna raise a lot
Yeah.
of discussion. Let's just say that you're either gonna love that
I
episode
enjoy that
or
a
hate
lot.
it. I don't really think there's gonna be much in between on that one. Anyway, without any further ado, let's cover a chunk of the timeline that's a lot
Yes,
less
Matt Pat, let's
controversial.
cover a chunk of
Let's
time.
meet Mike. William still wasn't back. Weird. Michael knew his father sometimes
What is
traveled
that?
for
What is
work,
this?
disappearing for
Michael
days on
Afton
end,
looking
but
dude.
Usually there was some sort of notice, a phone call, a post-it, something. It's not like Michael and his father were close, far from it. But as a household of 2 suffering men coping with years of tragedy
Try to
and
be here
loss,
for
there
all.
was at least some
So in
element of
total, we have
communication
how much
between
time
the two of
left?
them. They were united by a name and
So
a shared
about
pain.
23 more
This time,
minutes
things felt different.
plus
William had left
29.
nothing. His absence was longer. There were no check-ins, no updates, just silence. Something
About
had happened. If there was one thing Michael knew about his father,
40,
it was that he had
50 minutes?
contingencies, safety
A little over
checks,
50
backup
minutes
plans.
left.
His father was a careful and guarded man.
We're-
He held
we're
his cards
watching.
close to his
We're
chest,
watching.
and as such, William had prepared him in the event that something like this ever happened. Normally, his father kept his home office locked, but in the event of an unexpected, prolonged absence, Michael had been instructed
I do need to
enter
post a
his
TikTok.
father's
So
office
as I'm
and look behind
working
the
on
set shelves mounted in the corner of the room. Rolling
as
his
I'm
eyes,
watching a
Michael
TikTok,
entered
I'm
the
gonna
office.
as I'm
He never fully
watching
understood how William was able to
FNAF.
spend so many hours of his days locked up in
Minecraft
there was just
cobweb,
nothing to
Minecraft
do.
cobweb,
Most of this
Minecraft
place was
cobweb,
empty.
Minecraft
He
cobweb.
dragged himself over to the shelf in the corner, expecting to find an emergency contact.
So as I'm watching this, I'm gonna post like a TikTok because I have to do it. I post at least one TikTok every day.
Father, it's me, Michael.
So I need to start figuring out what to do.
Where you said it would be.
The shelf swung open and revealed a giant industrial elevator, one that led straight down into an underground bunker. But that was impossible. Hidden inside his childhood home was a secret entrance to an enormous underground science lair? It didn't make any sense. Seriously, it didn't make any sense. And yet, here it was, mapped directly underneath the floor plan of the house that he'd grown up in, lost his brother in, been tortured in. Michael thought that he'd known his father, a prideful, sad, angry man with petty everyday problems, but clearly he'd been living with a
What do you usually do? I have no idea, bro.
His father had secrets.
It's
Suddenly, the days
I
of
post
William
like whatever I want to do. I'm focusing at the moment. I'm focusing on like using like a popular sound and just like using that.
Babies, entertainment, and rentals? The
But
Circus Baby restaurant always did seem to be a deeply personal
I haven't
project for
found
the
anything
father.
that really
A
sticks
failure
out
of
to
his that
me.
cut unusually deep, especially after that first location had to be closed prematurely due to the gas leaks. After that day, father really did seem to change, to lose himself even more in his work. Clearly, the entrance he had found was some sort of secret back way into the facility, one that required crawling through vents to navigate. His father had been working here, but in secret. Why? And that's when he found her. At the end of the facility, Circus Baby, his father's pride and joy. Except something was different about her. She wasn't like the others. The way she talked, the stories she told. This wasn't just a robot. She was alive somehow. And not only was she alive, she also felt familiar.
There is something bad inside of me. I'm broken. I can't be fixed. Will you help me?
Was this his sister? William's baby girl? But how? Why? What was this place? He dug around some old files and found blueprints outlining the features of these animatronics. Storage containers, voice mimicking, parental tracking. And was that a child in Freddy's stomach? Was his father collecting and experimenting on kids? Were all the rumors that he'd heard throughout his past actually true? That the animatronics came to life at night? That there were murders done in all the pizzerias? That his father had somehow been the prime suspect in all of it? Suddenly, Michael's mind flashed back to his persistent nightmares throughout his childhood. Had he been experimented on too? Tears stung in his eyes as anger Fear and confusion filled his body. His father's secrets were pouring out. William wasn't just a lame, overworked father. He was a monster, toying with life itself. Suddenly, everything clicked. He frantically looked around the room, blinking human heads on poles staring back at him. Green eyes, his sister. Blue eyes, his brother. Closed eyes, his mom. All just staring expectantly. These were meant to be human. William was working down here trying to make believable humans, literally rebuilding the family that they had both lost. The small little girl robots with their British accents roaming the hallways of this underground facility suddenly took on a whole new context.
Hello in there. Is this the same person?
Were those meant to be his sister? A replacement for her? A clone? Was William building clones of his sister? They seemed to know him, after all, to react to his presence.
They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
He always did have a bit of a resemblance to his father. Michael's mind reeled as the reality of his world crumbled to dust. No, he had to get them out of there.
Okay, I'm gonna show you a TikTok. Hold on, I'm gonna show everyone here a TikTok. Look it, it's can you see it? You can't see it. I'm gonna play the audio here. Well, you can't hear it.
There's nowhere for us to hide here.
Led by the voice of Circus Baby,
I'm gonna play the audio here through the mic so you can know what he's saying first, and then I'll put it up close to the camera so you can hear it. I'm gonna lower down the volume of you.
You are in the scooping room now.
Okay, here.
The scooper only hurts for a moment.
Wide open. Oh my god. He's absolutely right. Oh, he just blew the case wide open.
Okay, and then I'm gonna play up close to the camera. You can see it.
With a mechanized arm that could infuse new bodies with the soul. William could finally give and take away life. The only thing he needed were the bodies. But William wasn't the only one looking for bodies, as Michael was about to learn.
Blew the case wide open.
If you don't know what he's saying, it says German people one random day in 1939. That's so funny, bro. I think I just found my TikTok.
His sister had lied to him. Another game of pretend.
What can I do with this though? Oh my gosh, he's absolutely right.
Arm into his body. As he heard his bones ripping through his flesh, Michael blacked out.
But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not.
I have it. I have an idea.
For the next several months, Michael's life.
I have an idea. Okay. TikTok mode activate. I only have about 40 minutes to get this TikTok done. So bear with me as I get ready to do this. I have to go. Sorry. And no worries, bro. Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate you. Have a good night. Have a good day wherever you are, bro. Nice.
Rotting corpse, alive but wishing he wasn't. He was a puppet, a walking shell. And while he did his best to conceal his fate, there was only so much a man filled with robot spaghetti could do. The entity in his innards would eventually leave, but by that point the damage had been done. His decaying flesh stank, turning him into a literal purple guy. But still, even with no bones, even with rotting purple flesh and begging to die, Michael continued to live. That silvery metal remnant injected by the scooper meant that he couldn't die. His anger also refused to die. What he had seen down there in his sister's location had rocked him to his core. His father had killed and captured dozens. His experiments had killed his sister and then tortured him throughout all his childhood. He was actively trying to build human replicants. He didn't know where his father was, but Michael knew that he was out there somewhere.
I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
Michael had to correct for the sins of his father. He had to make things right. Michael would burn Fazbear Entertainment to the ground. I mean, what else could you do when your skin was permanently purple? Michael's strategy was simple. He would apply for night security guard positions at the old defunct pizzeria locations. That way, no one ever had to see him or smell him during his shift. And all these old, shuttered locations did need guards. Teenage vandals and squatters were always looking to get inside these abandoned buildings, and yet no one ever really wanted to work an overnight graveyard shift unless they were practically out of options. Enter Mike. One by one, he would take on the job of security guard, change his name each time to ensure that
My
no one
main
would
goal
follow his
got banned. How you doing, bro? Appreciate you stopping by. I'm currently recording my daily TikTok, if you don't mind. And I'm also listening to Matt Pat. Thank you for following, bro. I really appreciate it. You're amazing. You're awesome. Yeah, how you doing? Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it. We're on number 59 out of 60 on Fnaf game theories. If you stop by for that, really appreciate it. Hell yeah. Currently recording a TikTok, if I haven't said that already.
Yeah,
I need to get it done before midnight. Okay, I don't care about TikTok. Fair enough, but I have to do it because I want to. It's my goal. Just enjoy me struggling to get this done, so I can
bigger, better Freddy Fazbear's. He spent weeks
okay.
there looking for clues as to his father's whereabouts. And each time at the end of his week's shift, he would then set the location on fire.
I'm just blasting. I'm blasting the game through my speakers, through my headphones, so I can hear it still.
All this revisiting of his past, though, was causing the nightmares to begin again. Hallucinations that brought him back to his childhood. The guilt around killing his brother.
I am doing
dreams were
this.
oddly mixed with the
I need to download this video first.
But it would all be worth it in the end. The goal was to eventually stumble across the one
the video.
the one job
I'm gonna put it onto my
him with his father.
CapCut.
Little did Mike know that that day would come sooner than he expected. 2023, an advertisement came across Mike's TV. Fazbear Frights, a new horror.
I watched the theories and they're the best. Yes, they are really good.
It made Mike sick.
I mean, they're really entertaining. MapHead's got it down to a science on how to like make these things really good.
This wasn't a joke or entertainment.
I mean, good on him. You know what I mean?
If this team was combing through his family's history, they might stumble across something that could be useful. And if his father was truly still alive as he suspected, there would be no way that he wouldn't show up here. Maybe finally this could be the final chapter in his family's marathon of tragedy. Mike applied for the job and was immediately given the keys. Years of doing this had taught him that security guards rarely receive thorough security checks. They also liked how creepy Mike looked. They thought it was a costume, on theme for the job. What little they knew.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
For weeks, there was nothing. But just as Mike considered giving up, he received the call that he'd been waiting for.
Timer plus.
You're not gonna believe this.
Can I recommend the game? Yeah, of course you can, bro. Oh yeah, just put in chat. No worries.
Sure enough, there he was. William inside his iconic golden Bonnie springlock suit. Only now it was green and decaying with age. And there they were, a small family of broken men finally reunited. It's been a long time, Dad. Mike had always struggled with the phantoms of his past haunting him, but now all the animatronics he'd encountered over the past months, hopping from pizzeria to pizzeria, suddenly sprang to life, their burned faces haunting him as he tried to keep track of his father on the cameras. It would seem that William's mere presence had put the spirits on high alert. Ultimately, they were harmless, more annoying than anything else, but there was one.
I need to train myself to do this.
More than just a mere phantom, the security puppet. If he looked at the cameras at just the right moment, he could see it floating there through the halls. He could even see its reflection in the water pooled on the ground. It would seem like he wasn't the only one there on a mission. While he was dealing
maybe
with
Fnaf because it's on stream.
Finally setting him to rest.
Steam screen.
And in that moment,
I mean, I like all the games, so I mean, I'll probably play them eventually. If I can get a decent enough PC, I'll play them on stream. But right now, I'm just watching videos because that's what I can do.
Rigged the wiring inside the building to misfire, and the dry, desiccated walls erupted in flames. It is finished. Except it was not. Somehow, through sheer force of will, Afton remained. He had survived, and Mike would need to find a new way of finishing off his father. Luckily, the solution would present itself later that year. Not from Mike, but from another victim that had been left in his father's...
I'm trying to lip sync like this one sound that I found.
Fazbear Entertainment franchisee, restaurant ownership and management. Something almost anyone can
What if I make it like
do
sped
with a
up?
limited degree of success. You are now the face of the newly rebranded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Fazbear Entertainment as a brand had been closed for years. William had been stuck in a suit and a wall. The only person who legally could bring the franchise back was Henry, but he'd largely pulled out of the franchise around the time of his father's disappearance. Something was up. Surely this had to be some kind of a trick, right? Mike, doing what he did best, applied for a franchise and immediately got the job. There was just one thing out of the ordinary. Paragraph 4.
If you are playing this tape, that means that not only have you been checking outside at the end of every shift, as you were instructed to do, but also that you have found something that meets the criteria of your
Okay, this is so cringe. Hold on. Let me check this out.
No employment contract he'd ever signed required him to keep special lookout for independently moving animatronics outside the restaurant. Now he knew something was up here. Henry was luring them all back. Rather than trying to go to them,
I did it. I got it. It's cringe, but I like it.
All under the same roof. He was finishing them off for good. Mike knew this wasn't meant to be a restaurant. It was meant to be a prison, a containment vessel, a locked box meant to trap them all in so they could finally end the madness. It took a few nights, but eventually everyone was there. His father, the puppet, the robot spaghetti that had once violated his body, and his
Okay, we
sister,
get this clip, right?
hopelessly devoted to serve the man that had once gotten her killed. It was time. He had been instructed to seal the doors and leave, but while he locked everything down, he didn't move on. If this was truly meant to be the end, if the remnant needed to be washed away, he needed
Okay,
to
they're gonna
be
do
free.
audio.
This is where your story ends. And to
Plus
you,
sounds.
brave
Extract.
volunteer who somehow found this job
Nope.
listing
Already extracted.
unintended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a
Did I mute
feeling
this
that's
one?
not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
And with that, it was over. The Afton legacy died with all of them trapped inside of a literal box. As the flames danced around the office, Mike, for the first time in decades, was happy. But William wasn't gone yet. Although the darkest pit
Really
of
happy
hell
about
was
this
open
TikTok.
and waiting for him,
I don't know what to caption it.
someone wouldn't allow him to move on. Instead, he found himself locked in moments from his past. The pizzeria, his son's room, his underground bunker. It was as if his brain's neurons were all firing at once, overloaded, mixing and matching all his biggest fears, regrets, failures. What was this place? How did he get here? He called out into the silence. Then they started coming. Without warning, animatronics, both new and old, began to jump out at him, bite him, rip him limb from limb. The pain was immeasurable. Make it stop. Make it stop. William, for the first time, longed for death,
I
an
just broke my
end
thing.
to this torture. Just as it
The
felt like
frick?
he couldn't take it anymore, everything was quiet again. It was as
Okay.
if the world had been reset. There was a brief moment of quiet, and then the onslaught began again. Dozens of faces from his past all focused on him. A waking nightmare that he couldn't escape from. More pain, more ripping. It was his own personal hell, but why? Why couldn't he just die? And then he saw them. A group of characters he never thought he'd see again. Those janky, stolen characters that had started everything. The mediocre melodies. It had all started to go wrong once they showed up. Once Henry had made them. But mixed in with their obnoxious southern drawls, William heard something else. It was barely a whisper, but he could just make out the words.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
That voice. He knew that voice, but from where? The one he shouldn't have killed. William thought back. He'd done a lot of awful things, but there was always the one that stood out. Not Charlie, his drunken act of revenge. Not Susie, his first true murder. No. Instead, it was the one that he had lost control with. The one that he had broken beyond repair for no good reason other than because he could. The one that he'd stuffed inside the golden bear that his partner used to wear. Cassidy. They were back, and now they were trying to punish him, to make him suffer like he'd made them suffer. It was almost like William and Cassidy's souls had been locked together, fused by a collective rage and spite, each refusing to move on. But while Cassidy was so focused on taking revenge, they actually did the one thing that would be the downfall for so many others. They kept William alive. Even though fire should have destroyed the remnant that was coursing through his being, Cassidy kept William breathing, paving the way for his escape. William's will was so strong, his soul so powerful that he managed to put a part of himself inside the circuitry that housed the spring-locked suit. And there, his consciousness lay, inside a single circuit board, waiting for someone to find him and set him free. A person that no one would suspect. Okay, so a bit of a shorter chunk, but an important one as we shift perspectives to Mike and tell his side of the story. And with Fnaf VR, AR, and Security Breach having so much to explain, I didn't want to rush through things by trying to cram it all in here. Don't worry, I know you've all been patient. The final video is happening on March 25th. That is locked, it is getting ready to go. Trust me, I want this thing to be over and done with as much as you. I am not just stretching it out for the views. But before we wrap up for the day, I did want to talk about the big Orville elephant in the room, Mike's quest for revenge. You might have noticed that I was vague about the dates, and there's a good reason for that. I don't know them. There is no good way for me to make them fit in. Here's what I do know. We know with a high amount of certainty that Michael Afton is the character that we play as up until Ultimate Custom Night. Mike Schmidt and Fritz Smith, the security guards for FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 respectively, get fired for, quote, tampering with the animatronics and odor. So weird connection between the two of them, right? But now, look at the phantom animatronics that are haunting us in FNAF 3. They use models from both FNAF 1 and FNAF 2, meaning whoever is sitting in that security guard chair Fazbear Frights, they have to have seen both locations and their animatronics. And that's not all. Their designs are burnt. It's a weird detail in the game, and it's something that the character encyclopedia repeatedly calls attention to: the burned texture for these phantom animatronics. Why is that so unusual, though? Fazbear Frights is the first time in the franchise that we hear about anything burning down. From that point on in the story, it's like the characters turn pyro and are suddenly setting fires left and right. But for the first 3 games, nothing ever catches fire. The animatronics are just moved or repurposed in some way. So when did they burn? And why would our security guards see them as being burned? Someone has to have been going location to location, setting these places on fire, purging the sins of the past. We know we're definitely playing as Mike and Sister Location in Fnaf 6 based on the in-game dialogue. And in Fnaf 4, there's an Easter egg where we can hear the phone call from Night 1 of Fnaf 1, meaning that whoever's in that bedroom has heard the recording as a security guard. We also know that Mike has seen the nightmare animatronics based on his drawings in the security logbook. So overall, there is solid evidence that connects all of Fnaf's 1 through 6. You'll also notice how the character encyclopedia doesn't have a page for Mike Afton. This thing has a page for Chocolate Bunny Bonnie, but not Michael. Some tells me they don't want us to confirm how many games he's been in, because that would confirm too much of the theory. In short, this gives us an incredibly compelling and complete narrative. Mike as our protagonist, and William, his father, as our antagonist. Mike accidentally kills his brother in Fredbear's mouth, which begins our story and sets William down his pathway of destruction. Mike is then haunted by the guilt of his past and is looking to make things right across the rest of the games. In Sister Location, he learns what his father's been up to and realizes what he has to do to correct it. After failing to finish the job in Fnaf 3, he ultimately helps Henry end it all in Fnaf 6. It is great. It is a clean narrative. There is just one problem: timing. Mike's quest can't really start until he's been down to Sister Location, seen Baby, and gotten himself scooped. That's when he finds out about Afton's secret life. It's also when he's gonna start to smell, because, you know, he's a walking, talking, rotting corpse. And we know that he's not going down into the bunker until the Funtime animatronics have been made, Freddy's has been closed, and Afton is out of the picture. That all should be happening post-1993, after William is sealed behind a wall. But that then presents us with a few problems. Afton has already dismantled the original animatronics as we see in the Fnaf 3 minigames. How are those things getting burned if they're already deconstructed? But more importantly, we see Fnaf 2 paychecks with the date 1987. That is way earlier than I think it can be. To be fair, Fritz Smith's pink slip on night 7 doesn't have a date, but it's a bit weird to say that the first few nights are in 1987 and then employee number 3 is hired on years after the restaurant closes. Anyway, just wanted to call that out because I don't have a solid answer for it, and I'd love to see your comments down below. And with that, my friends, this chapter comes to a close. We'll see you on March 25th for the grand finale as we cover the final 3 games in the franchise and the controversial answers we think solves what those games were trying to tell.
Final video, let's go.
My fast heads, remember, even though Afton kind of succeeded in being brought back to life, gotta admit, he's still looking a little bit on the dry, dehydrated side. I suppose 3 fires and being dead for a decade will tend to do that to ya. Fortunately, thanks to today's sponsor, Air Up, I think we can help him out with the hydration thing, not the whole burning alive thing. You guys know that I hate drinking plain water. It's just boring. And that then led me to my current crippling Diet Coke addiction. However, Air Up has found a way to harness the power of science to get me to drink more water, which not only do I love in principle, but I can truly say has changed my drinking habits forever. They use these special scent pods that fit directly onto the top of the bottle, and almost as if by magic, it makes the water tastes like basically anything you want. How? If you guys have ever watched Food Theory, you've probably heard me say that smell is more important than taste, and that's exactly what Air Up's taken advantage. Internet,
welcome to Game Theory.
And the final part of my FNAF timeline, where today we're bringing our story to a close by talking about the most complicated and controversial part of the timeline, the part that I've been dreading most of all, the end. The moment where we're finally forced to come to some definitive and difficult answers trying to explain what the heck we were watching in Security Breach. The last 2 episodes have been about death. The death of Afton's family, the deaths of multiple children, the death of the franchise itself as Mike and Henry figuratively and literally burn it all down. Today's episode, though, and the current end of this franchise, is instead all about rebirth, the return of old characters in new forms, and the controversial rebirth of a franchise entering the next era of its story. But before we hop into the timeline, due to scheduling conflicts, I won't be able to have any live talk back after this episode. I know, I promised one, I was really excited about it, but I just couldn't make it work with my schedule and all the other guests' schedules. That said, I still do plan on doing one over the coming weeks with special guests. Just make sure that you're subscribed and either have all notifications turned on, or you're just watching our community tab for the announcement as to when that's gonna happen. And now, without any further ado, we finally reach the end and a new beginning to our story. Fazbear Entertainment was dead.
There is no need for you to return to work next week, as Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity.
All debts had been paid, all assets redistributed. The company was outright dissolved. Even the memories of the horrors that had happened there started to fade away in the public consciousness. The people were gone too. William was dead. Henry was gone. A whole generation of young Emilys and Aftons had lost their lives to the horrors of the pizzeria. All of them collateral damage to the man in the bunny suit. Everyone the company had ever touched was dead and gone. Well, all except one.
Pay your child support, you deadbeat! I'm keeping the diamond ring. I also set the house on fire!
Clara Afton. She'd been there in the early days, back when things with William were good. They'd had the perfect home, a thriving business, the ideal family. But shortly after their youngest son died, things started to change. William had become distant, lost in his work, obsessive. She had watched him change from this irritatingly brilliant man that she had fallen in love with to a drunken monster struggling to hold himself together. And despite her trying to reach out to him in those desperate days, he was just too far gone.
I made. Yo, what's going on? How you doing, bro? Appreciate you stopping by. We're in the last video. Very cool.
For her sake, she had to leave the relationship, and from there she largely faded into obscurity. A mystery from William's past, a footnote in his history, and that was fine for her. She wanted to leave that part of her life behind. She tried to move forward, never wanting to hear the name Freddy Fazbear again. A time defined by mistakes and broken promises. But then, the paperwork started to arrive. As Fazbear Entertainment began to close as a corporate entity, suddenly her mail was flooded with notifications, requests, obligations. She had been there since the beginning, helping William in the early days of his business, and now, as a shareholder and sole living member of the Afton family, all copyrights and trademarks of both Afton Robotics and Fazbear Entertainment passed on to her. Memories of this past life that she had long left behind. Looking at the blueprints, the contracts, the memos, she felt old wounds begin to reopen. The regrets of a happy family that had been torn away from her. William had always been brilliant. That's what had attracted her to him in the first place. But he'd also been too blinded by obsession and pride. He was too jealous, too petty, too unable to actually see a bigger picture. But now, holding the paperwork that contained decades of heartbreak and trauma, she realized
Where is he getting all this stuff from?
this was her chance, and one thought resonated.
Was this in the games, bro?
I will put them back together. I will put them all back together. She would be the one to rebuild this family, to rebuild the pieces of that shattered life, to reclaim the kids that Fazbear had stolen from her. But how? Looking at William's work now laid out before her, she knew that he had been onto something, collecting remnant, robotic humanoids, digital conscience transfer.
Didn't want to miss anything. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. Hell yeah. We're almost there.
It was almost like there were too many ideas going in too many different directions. It was such an important
We
idea
got
that she reiterated that point to herself. There were
like
too
26 more
many
minutes
ideas
left, so
going in too many different
we're getting there. And we just hit the 12-hour mark for being on stream.
To rebuild her family, she would first
Hell yeah, bro. Let's freaking go.
with ownership over the characters, their licenses, the technology patents, the Fazbear name, she converted the corporation back to an LLC, a structure for smaller businesses that are usually
It's a long time. True.
The irony was fitting. From there, she would need remnant, and lots of it. Remnant was the key. Clearly, in the later years of his life, William had been using Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals as a remnant farm, sending robots to kids' birthday parties in the hopes of nabbing bits of the stuff here and there. But clearly, it wasn't enough. He had, what, like 4, maybe 5 animatronics going out every week? No. It was a decent idea, but to get the remnant they required, it needed scale. Dozens, hundreds of animatronics all out there, all gathering remnant from unsuspecting customers. But to do that would require help, something William would never ask for. William had kept everything in-house. His obsession with control limited him. Clara, though, she wasn't nearly that precious.
But where is he getting this information from? You just made up a story and just like went with it?
To do the heavy lifting. So she contacted a mid-sized delivery company, DLZ Shipping Solutions, to help build replicas of all the original animatronics. And with meal delivery apps being all the rage, why not an animatronic delivery service? Order one to
I have no
celebrate
idea,
your
bro.
birthday, your Halloween party. How about a
You
4th
guess
of
so,
July
yeah.
picnic? We'll invite Liberty Chica and 4th of July Freddy on over. She would make sure that they made skins for every occasion. Chocolate Bonnies for Easter, Shamrock Freddies for St. Patrick's Day, Dia de los Muertos Chicas. And thus, the Fazbear Funtime service.
Would that be a little racist?
That's right. With the Fazbear Fun Time service, you'll never be alone again. You'll always have someone watching your back.
Was it ridiculous? Absolutely. Was it a sellout? No doubt. It was exactly the sort of thing that William would
Damn, those are good designs. What are you talking about? Like, I would order that. Damn.
The novelty of ordering an animatronic wore off after like what, one, maybe two times. But with new
I know
skins
what
for new
you. I
hobbies,
know
suddenly you had yourself
a
an
person that
animatronic
was.
perfect for every occasion. It would keep
Huh?
people hooked
I
from
know
ordering the latest and greatest that
what you. I know about person that I was in that I don't know.
while they'd be collecting and returning the remnant back to her. In a
Huh?
word, it was
I'm sorry. You had a stroke, my guy? Like, what's going on there?
no one trusted the Fazbear name. The company's brand was still mud in the public eye. No one would want to hire animatronics from the restaurant franchise known for murdering children. Nothing kills a party quite like the threat of death, you know. So she needed to find a way to discredit the stories that had
I look kind of bald,
She needed to win
right,
back
like
the
this.
public's affections, reactivate some nostalgia for
look
the
fine.
spooky stories of their childhoods. She needed a game. Multiple games, in fact.
They lied to us. They lied
I have a
to
voice
all
thing
of
on
us.
accent. I was
They
talking to
said the whole
bruh.
point of this VR game was to
That's
undo
funny.
the bad
And no
PR
worries.
by a rogue indie game developer. But that's not true at all. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
Struggling game developers were a dime a dozen online, most working on their magnum opus between shifts at the Dollar General. So she found one. Steve just picked him out of obscurity, the right mix of desperate and doofus willing to say and do anything for a couple extra bucks. And he fell right in line, as expected, delivering stupid little things with dumb generic names like Mangle's Quest, Balloon Boy's Air Adventure, Five Nights at Freddy's. Bad gameplay with even worse graphics, but hey, they got the job done. People were suddenly talking about the clues inside of these things, searching for the hidden lore. They were actively making jokes about dead kids at pizzerias. Her husband's twisted history of serial murder had suddenly been reduced to a mere Nancy Drew mystery to be solved. The plan had worked. Freddy Fazbear's was suddenly more popular than ever. Things were going shockingly well. Her takeover and reboot of the franchise was full and complete. Suddenly infused with cash, she built the largest, most ambitious project yet, the Mega Pizzaplex. William had always been so visionary, but always thought so small scale. He was careful to a fault. Not her, though. She knew that this latest project needed to be big. It needed to be flashy. It needed to be a palace for children. A place that got people talking and checking out the latest in Fazbear products. So with a
That would not be profitable at all.
it was finally time. The stage was set. It was time to get to her real goal, literally rebuilding a family. March 2035. The first was obvious.
That would have been so funny. it was September 11th, 2001. That would have been so good if it. So I'm gonna make an edit like that where it just says September 11th, 2001. That'd be funny.
Small details that no one would notice, like the band-aid on his left knee. Williams' research had even found ways of making animatronics that could bleed and process food, making them virtually indistinguishable from a typical human. He would never have any idea of what he actually was unless he was explicitly told. The only things that could possibly ruin the illusion were
That would make nothing.
to his internal systems. If something were to say interfere with the
Fair enough.
cameras that he had in his eyes, or cause some sort of a core reboot to his hard drive, or x-ray his metallic bones, then yeah, he would be exposed. But otherwise, to the outside world, he was just your typical normal human boy. She worked down in the bowels of the Pizzaplex, giving him life, but it was one thing to build him, it was another to help him remember his identity. He died so young, so early in their history that there was no preserved memories for him, no documentation that she could just download into his digital brain. So bit by bit, she trained him, forcing him to remember who he was. In a corner of the room, she even made a makeshift dinner table, a reminder of their happier days. The family recreated: 2 brothers, a sister, a father,
I don't
a mother
think
at the head of the table. The one
this
in
is.
the one in command, the one bringing all of this to fruition. But his progress was admittedly slower than she would have liked. At first, he could only
Just tell him.
do simple ones and zeros, then rudimentary drawings and crude letters. But bit by bit, images of his past life started to come through. Balloons, colors, houses, bears and faces, birthday parties. All for me. Gregory was alive. As the robot boy embraced her, she felt a warmth that she hadn't in decades. This was the joy that she'd been working towards. This was what it was all for. Her son, back in her arms again. The plan was working. She had to keep going. Next was William. If the family was truly going to be put together, she would need him. And she knew exactly where he was, in the ruins of that old Freddy Fazbear's pizza place where Henry had trapped him. In fact, that's specifically why she insisted on building the Pizzaplex there over the sinkhole. It was the best place to hide what her true intentions were with the entire operation. Digging through the wreckage, she found him. He was right where she thought he'd be. Seeing the putrid shell of the Springtrap suit, though, was not something she was prepared for. The rotting corpse of William Afton was disgusting. Scorched flesh fused into the fur lining. Hollow black sockets where eyes once were. A smell that reeked of burned carbon and bloody iron. He was no longer flesh. It was just the tangled sinews of a creature that was once called human. How far this brilliant man had fallen. It was clear that her work was cut out for her on this one. Afton was practically lifeless. The man may not have been able to die, but he was about as close as you could come. And his body would need a lot of reconstruction. Replacement arms and endoskeleton reinforcements were the top priority. Maybe pulled from their new line of glam rock animatronics. She'd have to see if they had any spare Bonnie parts lying around that they could steal. In the meantime, though, she threw the husk that was once her husband into a life support pod infused with aerosolized remnant to help keep him stable. But more important than recovering his body was recovering his mind. In his current state, he was comatose, an empty shell. Severe brain damage starts at temperatures over 108 degrees Fahrenheit. 42 degrees Celsius, and years of repeated fires had burned his brain to goo. Gone was the brilliant, frustrating mind that had drawn her to him in the first place. But she had a plan. Unlike her darling boy Gregory, Afton had found ways to record his consciousness. Fundamentally, the brain is only a series of electrical connections after all, so why couldn't you replicate that in the form of a standard circuit board? In essence, you could create a digital consciousness. And one thing she knew about William, he was nothing if not cautious. A planner, someone who had backup plans to his backup plans. And sure enough, there it was, buried in piles of old animatronic CPUs, a record of Afton himself. But she needed someone to test it.
Someone was definitely here during the night. It had to have been the client. I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves.
Unlike the other games that she'd paid to have made in the past, this one had a different purpose. This wasn't about PR, it was about getting William back up and running, spreading his virus to the masses.
You acknowledge that Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for accidental digital consciousness transference, real-world manifestations of digital characters.
She hired a new developer, Silver Parasol Games, to scan the boards and bring her husband into the system. And because of the immersive nature of VR, William's consciousness would be able to merge with the player, giving him a new body, a new agency. There was just one complication. Afton's hold wasn't as powerful as she had hoped. He wasn't able to gain complete control. The first trial run, Jeremy, was so desperate to escape from his grasp that he sliced his own face off with a paper shredder. Messy. Afton's followers were reluctant, to say the least, but it was the second attempt that looked like it had the potential to kill two birds with one stone. Enter Vanessa. Mrs. Afton wanted a surrogate daughter. Her darling Elizabeth would have been a young woman at this point if she had lived. And Clara wanted someone who wasn't Elizabeth but could be just like her. Could she have just rebuilt her like Gregory? Sure, but she decided against it because she wanted an actual human mother-daughter connection. Well, that, and it would be redundant and narratively unsatisfying to have two robot kids in the same family. What could she say? William had put a lot of tools on the table for her to use, and she was planning on using them all. Plus, Elizabeth had always been so loyal to Daddy. It was time to give her a second chance, a true choice. And Vanessa seemed to be the perfect candidate to fill the role.
Why she look like an elf for?
Your dad didn't play
That's weird.
fair, did he? He used to make your mum look bad in court. He manipulated you. I know your mum after she lost the custody case. I was supposed to be a good girl.
She started as a QA tester at Silver Parasol Games, the VR game development company that was part of her plan to bring back William. But more importantly, Vanessa checked all the correct boxes. Right age, blonde, green eyes with a fondness for flowers and the outdoors. In many ways, it was her daughter all over again. Except it wasn't just looks and personality. What really mattered was Vanessa's mind. Underconfident, coming from a broken home, motherless, able to be manipulated. Yes, she would do nicely. She would be the one to save dear old Daddy, just as the real Elizabeth would have wanted.
I will make you proud, Daddy.
While testing the VR game, William's digital consciousness merged with Vanessa. Oh sure, she fought, fragmenting Afton's code into a series of tapes hidden across the game, trying to do web searches to regain control over her life, but it wasn't enough. She was weaker than Jeremy. She was a thrall that, despite occasional moments of lucidity, had to obey. And with Vanessa, it was a 2-for-1 deal. She was getting a daughter back, while also bringing her husband one step closer closer to reactivation. She just had to make sure that Vanessa was headed the right way. The reborn Gregory was an expert hacker, part of the benefits of being an Afton and a robot. So Clara had him keeping tabs on Vanessa, hacking into her emails and trailing her therapy sessions to ensure the future Elizabeth was falling in line. If any of the therapists started to ask too many questions, they were promptly dismissed from their positions. And while Gregory kept tabs on Vanessa's personal life, Mrs. Afton made sure to clear a path for her professionally. With Silver Parasol's collapse at the hands of the Anomaly, she then had the possessed Vanessa bring the contaminated circuit boards to DLZ Shipping and the Fazbear Funtime service. More glitches, more Remnant, more Afton. But it was her last move that was the best. In a true masterpiece of poetry, she brought Vanessa over to be Chief Security Officer at the Pizzaplex. A true family tradition to don the hat and badge, and all it took was a recommendation from the top as well as some emails marked for deletion. Sure, Vanessa didn't have relevant experience for the job, but when it comes directly from the CEO, does it really matter? Husband, son, daughter. A corpse, a robot, a human. All that was left was Michael. Poor, troubled Michael. The boy that killed her youngest. The one that would spend years trying to make his guilty conscience right again. A self-professed protector. While she knew she needed him to complete the family, something told her that the problem had already solved itself. Something had shifted when using Glamrock Freddy to excavate the buried pizza place.
I have been here before. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the
That's a cool angle.
I've changed. My friends are here, but I can protect you.
Wait, so was Freddy...
Maybe it was the remnant that had coursed through Michael's veins. Maybe it was the spirit of Michael living on as a protector. But he was
So is Freddy possessed?
Inside of Glamrock Freddy. She could feel it. And just like that, she'd won.
Is he a good guy?
Sure, there were still some kinks to work out, some final brainwashing of Vanessa, some rehabilitation of William, but they were there. Finally, all together again under one roof. The Aftons reunited. A happy ending. And that's how it could have ended. That's how it should have ended, had it not been for a few unanticipated developments. For one, something was just wrong with the Pizzaplex. Almost as if the entire building was haunted, possessed. Puppet plushies hiding on ceilings, behind crates, places that they had no earthly way of belonging. Staff bots with greasy tears down their eyes acting like they were being puppeteered by some sort of a nightmare. Even their sounds had the echo of nightmares long past. It was as though a guardian spirit of the past refused to move on. As long as her husband was around, it too would linger. Only now, it wasn't just in one body, but it was in the essence of the building itself. She had seen stories of houses built on burial grounds getting possessed by angry spirits, but she'd never assumed that it could be real. Then again, in a world of living spirit metal and mind-controlling glitches, who was she to be so judgmental? The whole thing was ridiculous. Why would this be the line that she refused to cross? After all, the Pizzaplex was built over the burial ground of angry spirits, but it was the power cords that finally convinced her that something was wrong. Suddenly, these cords were striped black and white, like the security puppet from generations ago. The very foundations of this place, the materials and wires that constituted it, were rebelling against her, against the Aftons, against the quest to bring them all together again. And it was being helped by something else. Something slithering through the building. Maybe they were connected, she couldn't be sure, but a blob of living wires could be heard oozing through the walls, stealing pieces and parts of the old animatronics showcased in Rockstar.
What if I just...
So you could only assume
Whopper, Whopper, Junior... Whopper, 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 Junior, Whopper... Oh, sorry, messed up. Flame grilled taste. Something about today lettuce. May I pick up... frick, I can redo... I mean, you can't... Have it your way. Yo. Still going on. Oh, right. And be gay. Oh, thank you for that. How about Jam 2? That's great. Thank you. I was about to say before I was really interrupted by that chat message. What if I like... Because I was thinking, because since I always upload my VODs onto the VOD channel, people are going to see there's going to be a 12-hour video being uploaded on YouTube, right? They're probably not going to watch the whole entire thing. They're rather going to probably skip to the end and see how it's like. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lay still, like almost dead for a moment. So if they skip forward to the end, they're just going to see like a dead body. You know what I mean? Like this. And if I just stay like that, then we're chilling.
malfunctioned.
I have to do that for another 10 minutes. Okay.
Almost as though the core programming of Freddy responded to seeing this rebuilt small boy. Almost like it awakened something inside of him. She'd have to make sure that Vanessa was on the lookout for him, but she'd soon come to learn that Vanessa wasn't enough.
But if I stay like this, then it looks like I'm dead.
Awakened hatred of animatronics seated deep in Gregory's code, something had caused him to rebel, to rip apart each animatronic in the Pizzaplex. Bit by bit, this boy was tearing down the empire that she'd so painstakingly built, freeing Vanessa from her mind control, destroying the remains of Afton in the basement, setting Glamrock Freddy loose. As her carefully created world crumbled around her one more time, she began to plot her revenge. She would have to bring them all to ruin. And there you have it, my friends, nearly a decade in the making, my FNAF timeline for where the franchise is here in 2023, the year of Fazbear Frights.
When's your next stream?
Wouldn't be right for me to finish without going over some of the more
stream?
that I just handed out. I think we can all agree that this part of the timeline
I don't know.
is always going to be the hardest. So
not tomorrow, because I have work to do tomorrow.
First of all, the biggest swing of this episode, and
maybe Friday? I can stream this weekend. You'll see my notification. Make sure to ring the bell so that you get notified when I'm live. Or if you want to see more of me, check out my YouTube channel or my TikTok. Links are everywhere. They take you to everywhere. My podcast too. First episode's already out. Every 2 weeks, new episode out. On Patreon too. Yeah. But I'm gonna be streaming from time to time. I want to be consistent with it, so just give me some time. I'm gonna. I don't know what I want to stream next time. Probably some FNAF games. Probably play PS4. We'll see.
Or Mrs. Afton. Could it be someone completely new to the franchise? Absolutely yes, but in a game with so many returning faces and repeating themes, it would be pretty random and arbitrary. So, between these two girl bosses, who then would it be? Well, Elizabeth always wants to please her daddy, so she'd be most likely wanting to bring him to life. But then, what's Vanessa's role in all of this? Vanessa is clearly meant to be a parallel for Elizabeth. Same hair, same eyes, similar backstory, but if the main goal
and I'm gonna lay here and just die a little bit.
Clearly be the case in Security Breach, then there's no need for Vanessa to be involved at all. We already have Elizabeth running the show. It would also mean that we suddenly have two robot kids running around, which feels narratively repetitive and quite frankly kind of dumb. Now look at Mrs. Afton. We know next
It'd be funny though if I just lay here and pretended like I died. So when people skip to the end, they're gonna just see like a frozen body.
Every other piece of the lore fit. Suddenly, you can have one
when they're watching the VOD on YouTube.
One robot kid in Gregory, one brainwashed human in Elizabeth/Vanessa, one OG corpse in William, and one possessed animatronic in Mike. Narratively, it makes everything else cleaner. Legally, it's also the option that makes the most sense. As I call out in my narrative, she'd likely have some stake in the original company and all of its assets. So as Fazbear folds as a company, I'd suspect a lot of it would return back to her. But there was one clue that really sold me on this particular direction, and that was this right here, in the post-it room, the big lore central of Security Breach, a dinner table scene with the whole family, including the mother. And not only is she there, she is at the head of that table, the position of highest honor and responsibility. She is the one in charge, with William being relegated off to the side. That one scene shows that we have to include Mom in there somewhere, and the only place it makes sense for her to be is at the top. Now, there is one big dilemma with my interpretation of all this. The Ultimate Guide really seems to point out that the head of Fazbear doesn't want the glitch trap virus to spread. They call out one particular email in FNAF AR where the legal team calls a cease and desist to all action about scanning the circuit boards. And even in FNAF VR, we're told that the circuit boards get stolen back by the client, presumably once they realize what danger is on there, trying to stop glitch trap before he spreads and gets out of hand. Here's the problem with that though. If the head of Fazbear doesn't want Afton to rise again, why'd they restart the company in the first place? Why'd they build over the FNAF 6 pizzeria? Why'd they go through an elaborate cover-up to make the possessed Vanessa an important part of the company? Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It would be the most inconsistent series of actions ever, but I did want to call attention to it since it seems to be the route that the official guide is trying to steer us towards. Moving on to minor point number 1, the Five Nights at Freddy's games were made by the Rogue indie developer. Here's the thing, FNAF VR opens with this line.
That's why we have recreated many of these completely fictitious scenarios, lies that you've been fed over the last several years. into a hilarious VR game.
It's recreating the lies told to you by the indie developer, and since Help Wanted has direct recreations of FNAFs 1 through 3, it means the games must be part of the fabrications that this developer made up. Also, all of this is heavily implied in the story of the same name, Help Wanted and Tales of the Pizzaplex, hence FNAF 1 through 3 canon games within the lore of the series. Big swing number 2, the elephant, or ghost in the room, Charlie infecting the Pizzaplex. John from the channel FNAF has made some great findings about Charlie's influence over the Pizzaplex. The cables that looked like the striped arms of the puppet, the Nightmarion plushies that you find hidden across the Pizzaplex in weird places, the staff bots with creepy smiles and in your dreams written on the front. All of these things scream puppets. Plus, with the puppet mask not having tears in the blob, seems to imply that Charlie's spirit exists elsewhere. She is still in play, and she has an important role, especially in Gregory's post-it room. The doors to the post-it room in the game's code are called Charlie doors, and inside we see a bunch of lit up nightmare staff bot heads. Suspicious, to say the least. The channel ID's Fantasy did a great theory looking at the post-it notes, concluding that the crying child / Gregory isn't alone in this room, but rather might be communicating with someone. A spirit, Charlie. Charlie's spirit seems to have pulled a poltergeist. Instead of controlling one thing, she's affecting a lot of little details, foundational elements of the Pizzaplex. And this isn't the first time that we've seen this in the franchise either. We've seen spirits communicating with people through physical writing in the survival logbook. So we know that this is an established means of spirit communication within this franchise. And I suspect that to some extent it might be Charlie's influence making Gregory go haywire. Which brings me then to my final and probably biggest controversy in recent FNAF history, Gregory as Patient 46, the evil robot mastermind. Now, I know when I first came out with this theory a year ago, people were mad. But here's the thing, you don't have to take my evidence points for it anymore. The recent Tales from the Pizzaplex story, GGY, basically goes and just outright proves it. In GGY, we find out about a boy named Gregory who's getting all the high scores in the Pizzaplex arcade machines. When therapists start to go missing, it's confirmed that GGY is the one that's working to bump them off. And when animatronics start getting corrupted by a mysterious glitch, GGY's letters are found inside the code. He even chooses the code name Dr. Rabbit, for crying out loud. But obviously, by the time of security breach, Gregory is working against Burn Trap, Vanessa, and the animatronics. Why? How? Well, it's not really clear. I tend to believe that something must have happened to cause him to either lose his memory or be reset in some way. Maybe it was Charlie talking to him in his post-it room. Maybe he hit his head. Maybe it was the connection that he made with Mike on stage in Glamrock Freddy. Not exactly sure, and I don't think we have enough clues to solve any of it yet. But it makes sense from a story perspective why he'd start off evil on Afton's side and then switch to trying to destroy him and not knowing who he is in security breach. And with that, my friends, I'm wrapping this thing up. Congratulations, we are on page 40. 22,000 words of FNAF, baby. Practically just wrote myself a Tales of the Pizzaplex short story. Have I answered everything? No. Does everything fit cleanly? No. But does it feel like the best and most cohesive narrative for all these characters that addresses most of the evidence we're given? Yeah. For me, honestly, it really does. And let's be honest with ourselves, the DLC will probably come out later this year and prove me completely wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. Then comes the movie, whatever. My descent into madness continues. But regardless, I am so proud of this. This was a massive undertaking, and I'm so proud of our editors who have just destroyed the editing across all 4 of these installments. You guys are the best. Thank you for pushing through on 20+ minute uploads. You are unreal, and your talent is unrivaled. I'm so lucky to work with you guys every single day. And like I mentioned before, keep an eye on the channel for an announcement regarding a talkback live stream with some special guests. Was I right?
The video map, Pat. Oh my gosh.
And with that, my friends, we can finally rest. I can leave the demon to its demons with one final reminder that it was all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.